My name is Nick Dagan Best. His name is Patrick Watson. We're both astrologers. And welcome to our second official episode, but upteenth general episode of the Astrology Livestream with Patrick and Nick. How you doing, Watson?
Good. Yeah. I'm ready to talk about Napoleon. How about you?
Napoleon. Yes. The little pig and Animal Farm. I remember him well. Oh no, wait, we're doing the real one, aren't we? Okay. Yes. On we go, onward. Napoleon Bonaparte. So we were originally going to do this episode. When was it? The end of November, the
A
beginning of
long time
December.
ago. Yeah.
Back when Ridley Scott was having a birthday and putting out this movie called Napoleon. Really, it should have been called Josephine or something like that. In my opinion, I am looking forward to the extended version, but at the same time, it's a marvelous cinematic experience. I'm a huge Ridley Scott stan, but it's not terribly historically accurate. We don't need to. This isn't a movie review channel. The movie is enjoyable as a movie, but boy, for someone who knows the history, it's kind of cringy. I guess that's my feeling about it. How do you? What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like it kind of buried the lead in a way with some of the events, and I also felt that it felt a little bit like the Wikipedia article of Napoleon Bonaparte, the movie,
Yeah.
without really giving like a perspective on it or a kind of a commentary on it. It just did feel like, and here's him doing this, and here's him doing that, and here's him, stomping his foot like a bull. I don't know. It just seemed, it just, you'd have to see it to know what I'm talking about. It just, it didn't seem like, there was any commentary on there's any number of things you could say about Napoleon the life, but in any case, this isn't necessarily a movie review channel. But yeah, my take on it was I wish that it had been more. I wish that it had been better. Very well made, very well shot.
Oh, very well made. On
too.
Netflix, there's a whole series on the life of Simon Bolivar, the Latin American revolutionary who helped found a number of the countries that exist there today. And this miniseries, it's really good. I forget how many episodes it is, but it's many. It's over 30. So it's a really detailed account of the whole, the man's life and a detailed account of the sequence of events that led to the sequential liberation of the different Latin American countries from Spain. And Napoleon more than deserves that kind of treatment. Like, you really do have this epic story. To my mind, a far more interesting movie. Like, Ridley Scott wanted to delve into the relationship with Josephine, which is all well and good, but it's sort of like everything else becomes a backdrop to that. And it's not done terribly well as it is. But to me, like, the really interesting Bonaparte story would be one about him and his family. He's got all these siblings and
drama.
Yeah, but like this huge sibling drama, way more interesting, way more
keeping
reality
up with the Bonapartes.
Yeah, no, it really is. I was about to say it's really reality TV. Like, that beautifully put. I couldn't have said it better. It really would be
there's I was gonna say I think that Napoleon would probably do better as like a mini series. Like if it was given like the HBO John Adams style treatment, that probably would be kind of more appropriate for going more in depth into the different parts of his life. But the other reason though that I think Napoleon has kind of come back into the discussion is not because, Ridley Scott just got this random idea to, try to make the movie that Stanley Kubrick never got around to making. But also because you've had this observation, Nick, that Napoleon is in some ways a kind of a good person for us to be looking at, as Pluto is going to be making its second ingress into the sign of Aquarius, because the last time it was there, that's where we kind of see the life of Napoleon really starting to take shape, and that would have a big impact on things that came later. What would you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. As we get into his life and his astrology, we do want to talk a lot about how the transit of Pluto in Aquarius is not just the transformative, but the transportative essence of what a Pluto transit is like, and that's something um, I see in Pluto. You know, a lot of astrologers will talk about how it's a sort of transformational experience with the transit, and while I say that's certainly true, I think it's also transportative. It literally carries someone to another world, puts them in a whole other world from the one they're used to living with in. So yeah, spoiler alert, that certainly accounts for Napoleon. So maybe without further ado, shall we dig into his natal chart and get into some transits and things like that. And then towards the end, we're going to go into his zodiacal releasing. So we have like an action packed, astrology packed fiesta here on Napoleon Bonaparte. So I hope people enjoy what we're going to do. There's also, I mean, right from the get go, we should say there's a loose bit of rectification that we're doing here as well, because um, we have what's, you know, probably an approximate birth time, and there's also, so we will touch on the controversy regarding the potential switching of Napoleon and his older brother Joseph's dates of birth, and address that rumor as well. I'm looking at you, Sam Reynolds. I know you're going to come after us with that one. And some others, you know, one or two others have mentioned it on Twitter too. And it's a fair thing. It keeps coming up to astrologers. And so we definitely want to touch on that and give everyone our take on that as well. So, all right, without further ado, shall we go?
Yeah, sure. So let's take a look at that data.
Yeah. I'm going to share the screen here. Hide that. Put this up here. And okay, so this is the 11 o'clock time that we get with Napoleon. And you know, I can also put up, if we want to see, the problem is I don't have a lot of spirit on my solar fire. So here it is on the AstroGold. Watson and I, after deliberation, we've definitely settled on the idea that Spirit is in Taurus and not in Gemini. And so he has to have been born, what was it, the first half hour of between like 11 and 11:30. Was that right,
Yeah,
Watson? Or was it even
more or
than,
less. I mean, you can animate the chart to see exactly when Spirit moves into
right?
Gemini, but based on the comparison
Yeah,
between,
it's about 30 minutes.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, he had to have been born before 11:30, basically, for the chart to make sense in the way that we think it does.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's the only bit of rectification, you know, that I mean, otherwise I think the chart works well with Scorpio rising, and actually the Pluto
Yeah.
transit into Aquarius is a really good confirmation um Scorpio rising in this particular case.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we're both pretty good Scorpio rising. It works with annual perfections, it works with zodiacal releasing. We've got a chart that you know, at least works with all the different tools that we regularly use and discuss here on the Astrology Livestream. So um, yeah, you could do a 2 week intensive using every astrological tradition and style on Napoleon's chart, but we're gonna devote 2-3 hours into just using our arsenal. See what I did there? Um, and
Well, and you know, think about it, you know, with Scorpio rising, you know, that makes the ruler of his ascendant this contrary to sect Mars in the 11th, which is interesting, just knowing on a very basic level what sort of person he was, or what, you know, what function he served in his life. And you know, I'd say, you know, being a soldier, being a general, that's certainly kind of a martial signature, you know. And
yeah,
he also wasn't necessarily known for getting on with, you know, his allies, or his allies often came under kind of worse situations than he did. So his chart seems to reflect in a very basic way, just by looking at the ruler of the ascendant, that his allies would be kind of endangered in some ways by you know, on account of him.
yeah.
With
Yeah. Well, by allies in that instance, you're talking about you know, his marshals, the military men
right,
around him,
exactly.
a number of whom go to the firing squad when he gets shipped off to Saint Helena. So, you know, more spoiler alerts there. Eventually, Napoleon loses. For those of you who don't know how this all ends, but anyway, yeah. The other thing about that Mars being out of sect, it's in the 11th house, and not only are his military men at in harm's way because of their association with him, but then the political alliances he forms are, really tenuous, and everyone from Tsar Alexander, to the Emperor of Austria, whoever the case may be, Metternich. Everyone that he's got us, and certainly the British, with Amiens, every ally he makes, or everyone he signs a sort of a peace treaty with, ultimately, double crosses him, or he double crosses them, or like
Right.
it's
So Alexander, yeah, that kind
yeah,
of
he
deteriorates.
right. He really doesn't have, many stable, sort of dependable friends or allies. Apart from maybe his stepson Eugène de Beauharnais, who really sort of goes the distance in a way that Napoleon's own, siblings don't. And one other thing about that Mars in Virgo being in the 11th house with Neptune, the reason Napoleon rises in the ranks of the military is because he's an artillery officer, which is somewhat specialized. And the reason he became an artillery officer is that he was very good at math.
So, so we see
It's
the Mercury association
exactly
there with that Marshall placement, right?
right. Like, I mean, this is an oversimplification of his
Mm.
education, but the long story short is, yeah, he doesn't even speak French when he first arrives, and in a minute we're gonna go into his schooling years. But he arrives as a stranger in school in France, and first has to learn French, and then gets sent to this military academy. And it's really his facility with math that makes him eligible to go into this more elite artillery, division, and that's going to be the thing that really helps him, rise to fame as a military guy. Is he's going to be a real innovator with that technology, and do things that people can't imagine.
Well, that's kind of the Mars Uranus trine, kind of innovative for his time.
It's a
Um,
grand trine too. It's a
yeah,
Mars grand trine with
that's right.
Uranus and Pluto, and then Jupiter being a sort of like the tip of a kite. It's a loose kite is what you have. Jupiter opposite Uranus, with the Mars and the Pluto forming a grand trine to Uranus, and both sextiling that Jupiter. So everything's really, really well integrated in that regard. You can see how all those features sort of work as a unit in his chart. And speaking of which, excuse me, another thing that we're going to see really as a sort of saving grace for his chart, and something I talk about a lot, is the mutual reception he has between the moon and Saturn. This is also, because of this mutual reception, these two planets, both of which would be, considered to be in a relatively poor placement by sign, are mutually bona fide. Uh, by that mutual reception, and we really see this come up a lot, over the course of his life. Certainly, someone who's got a really strong mother who sort of directs his career
Uh,
from
yeah. I mean, when you read about his relationship with his mother, it seems pretty um like tough love is probably the more kind way to describe it, but I mean, it's almost to the point of abuse. But strangely, Napoleon didn't seem to resent her for it. He always spoke very reverently, of his mother, and he kind of acknowledged that it was because of her kind of particular brand of disciplinarian parenting that he feels like he was able to kind of be as successful as he was. In fact, there's even some quote attributed to him where he says something like, the destiny of every person, can be traced back to, what the mother did for them. So there's some interesting things there. Although I wouldn't, the only way in which I differ from your interpretation, Nick, is that the Moon Saturn um, mutual reception would seem to spell a sort of trade off where perhaps for a period of time, um, the moon might kind of grant some more beneficial things where Saturn is, but then at certain points there could be reversals in that area as well, since Saturn, exchanges places basically with the moon, and we can really see that in stark relief when we look at his zodiacal releasing from
Mm,
Spirit, and when that axis becomes really activated in his chart. So we can see how dramatically that changes his situation, and not necessarily for the better. So
sure.
that's the only way in which I would somewhat differ, but I do think ultimately it's still, you'd rather have it probably than not. Uh,
That's the case I would make. I mean, I
yeah.
hear you on that, but ultimately, I mean, none of the good stuff can happen if he doesn't have that mutual reception, you know. And even, but I mean, there are some bittersweet things about it when we get into the. I mean, this is someone after all who's born a Corsican and grows up a really sort of anti-French Corsican, and somehow, in a very short period of time, he's going to go from identifying as a Corsican to, becoming a full-on French revolutionary.
Well, and that
Um,
seems to be a common theme to these kind of dictators, isn't it? That they don't always come from the place that
they
they
never
think
do.
they've been.
Hitler is Austrian, and he's the Führer of Germany. Stalin is Georgian, and is the head of the Soviet Union. So it's almost like it has to be this foreign guy who latches on to the hyper nationalism of the region in some way, or absconds with it.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, no, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, Napoleon does become as committed a Frenchman as, say, Hitler becomes a committed German. Um, although, yeah, Hitler, of course, calls all Germans a bunch of losers just before he shoots himself. But so that he's not that committed a German. I think he's more committed to his idea of Germans. But
Mm,
nonetheless,
yeah.
yeah, there is definitely something bittersweet about that whole thing. We'll go into the Venus and Saturn in Cancer in his chart quite a bit. I can think of another dictator who has Venus and Saturn in Cancer.
Yeah. He shall who not be named. So, in any case, um, so we've just been discussing basically these various configurations and placements in his chart, which we think kind of superficially, uh, speak to the actual person that we read about, and that
Yeah,
this isn't just some other random chart. That this really is kind of the right one we're looking at here. So
yeah.
this is sort of what we're kind of going with.
That's right. Now there is, you'll see, like for instance, on the notes for Napoleon's birth chart on Astro Databank. In fact, maybe I just pull that up and we look at that together. Astro Databank. Yeah, you can play along at home, folks. There we are, Napoleon the First. Okay, so in the notes for his date of birth, um, there is this whole what comes up is this is something that has been coming up over time, but it's shot down but never really dies. Is the idea that Napoleon and his older brother Joseph, that their dates of birth were switched, and there is some interesting documentary background that suggests that this might be the case. But a lot of it is asserted. What is asserted that um, in France, the tradition would be that the oldest son would be the one who went to military school, and that was a French tradition. But I have, for instance, this one book. There's a few books that touch on this whole situation, but this book here, "The Path to Power" by, I think Dwyer is the name, sorts out this mystery right here. As the oldest, this is Giuseppe is Joseph's, Corsican name, Italian name. As the oldest, Giuseppe went to the seminary of Autun, one of the most prestigious colleges in the kingdom. In France, as firstborn, he would have been destined for the military, but in Corsica, the church took precedence over the state. So Napoleon was sent to the military college at Brienne. In other words, because they're Corsican, the tradition is to send the oldest child to seminary as opposed to military school. And that's why Joseph goes to seminary. It's true, had they been born in France, then Joseph would have been the one to be sent to military school, and Napoleon would have been sent to seminary, which could have been
Well,
interesting.
makes sense. In case the soldier child dies, then you have one who survives
Well, yeah,
in a
no,
safer
sure.
field.
And and speaking of Napoleon's mother, that's the thing. I had the count. I don't have it handy, but she lost a number of children. At least 4 children didn't survive infancy. Already with Napoleon, there's however 8 or 9 kids, 8 kids, I think. But then there's, I think, another 4 who didn't survive, which wasn't abnormal in this day and age, as we know. Not all children made it. But you're talking about a woman who's by the time Joseph and Napoleon are born, she's lost at least 1, if not 2 children. I'm sorry, I knew that chronology really well, like a month ago, and it slips through my memory now.
No, no, yeah, no
But the
worries.
long story short is that that's what you have here is a woman who's already lost a bunch of children by the time any of them reach adolescence. And so some of that tough love that she shows Napoleon, I think, is a reflection of what that does to a psyche. The kind of trauma that women went through at this time when they did lose children. It was a totally normal thing, but no doubt traumatizing every single time.
For sure.
All right. Did you have anything else to
No,
add, or shall we
no,
go
I
into
mean,
some return?
there's so much to say just from that, but I think how this chart really comes alive is when you look, at the life, when you look at
Yeah,
when things happen, and that's what really, is kind of the more impressive
for
um,
sure.
demonstration, of astrology in action here with this chart.
For sure. All right. So with no further ado, we're going to jump right into Napoleon's 9th birthday, which happens to be the year that Pluto is just making its ingress into Aquarius. Not unlike now, where it's going into Aquarius, it's retrograding back into Capricorn, it's going back into Aquarius. Napoleon, of course, was born with the moon at 28 Capricorn and Pluto at 13. So over the course of these 9 years, Pluto has gone from 13 Capricorn, and it's just making its ingress into Aquarius. Now, the reason we're starting at the age of 9 is this is where we really start to hear about his life, in any kind of detail, because this is going to be the year that he's sent off to school. So at the age of 9, he is at a Leo perfection year, and a 10th house perfection year, rather, at the age of 9. And we can see that Mars is just making an ingress into Leo. It's nowhere near the sun. But we know that 2 years later, he'll have a solar return where the sun and Mars are much closer together in Leo. And that 2 years after that, they'll also be Mars and sun fairly close together. That's an interesting figure that works with the Mars cycle, where for periods of time, certain planetary cycles can have like an extended relationship to the perfection cycle, and that's what you're going to see here is sort of these Sun Mars co-presences align with the cycle to some degree. All right, so with this, Mars is opposite Pluto in the Sun sign in the 10th house. And Napoleon and Joseph are going to travel with their father to France, and Joseph will go to a seminary school, and Napoleon first has to go to one school to learn how to read, and then he is enlisted in a military school in Brienne. So these.
So
Oh, sorry.
imagine being 9 years old and your dad drops you off in a foreign country that you don't know the language to, and you have to figure it out. And and it's like a boarding school as well. It's not just like an after school program or something. This is leaving the country you knew, the language you knew, the culture you knew, and being kind of abandoned by your parents. So talk about a Pluto in the 4th house type of
Right.
transit. This is we know the fourth house's origins and parents and sort of our foundations. So, this is a time when we would have been able to have said, that this person, would be would go through a kind of transformative experience, that would probably change the nature of their relationship to their own kind of origins and identity and foundations, and that it would happen through potentially traumatic experiences involving home, house, parents. And so in this case seems to reflect his experience of being completely removed from the home and family that he knew, and having to completely adjust to this strange situation.
Yeah, and
um
transformative and transportative. He now a Pluto transit doesn't always take you to another country, but what's happening to Napoleon is, in its own way, very typical of a Pluto transit in that it changes the entire backdrop of a person's life. It's not merely, in his case, it does mean going to another country, but more fundamentally, an entirely different sort of you know. Uh, uh, arrangement of the environment. A Pluto transit could have you move around the corner, but it would be from living in a tent on the sidewalk to the penthouse of a high rise. It could be that short a distance, and yet that dramatic a change in the fortune.
Ludeman asks, was he Catholic? He was raised Catholic.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, that was from his mother as well. That's the
yes,
whole ninth house thing with the moon Saturn
yeah.
opposition.
Yeah. Later, of course, he's going to kidnap the Pope and hold him hostage for 5 years. But for the time,
Yeah.
for the time being, he's a good Catholic.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm not like
His
a.
relationship to faith changes for sure
Oh
as
yeah,
he gets older, and that's kind of partly a consequence of the secular nature of the French Revolution,
absolutely.
which is also kind of around the corner, relatively speaking, from this time. So, yeah. So I think that's pretty dramatic that he left his home and did this under Pluto's ingress. But it really has an even more profound significance, though, when you consider what came of this, right?
Yeah,
Because this is not just the late astrologer Alan White had this saying about Pluto where it makes big things little and little things big. And I'd like to think about that when we learn about what happens at Pluto ingresses into new signs. It's often something very, very small and mundane, which carries extraordinary importance for things that happen later. If you think of the Manhattan Project, going on around Pluto's ingress into Leo, that was a small group of people that no one knew about who were doing something which would change the course of the world. And in a completely different way, this is a future leader of France who would have this global impact, who was moving to that place under Pluto's passage into the fourth house. So
yeah,
little things become big. Um,
that's right. Now, I just put up a second chart from this year. He's still 9 years old, but this is a few months after he's left Corsica. At first, he went to a school just to learn French, like from January to May, which is a pretty short time to learn a
yeah,
language.
just get French. Yeah,
Yeah,
just get
just
it.
just learn. I mean, I guess going from Italian to French, it's a little easier because the vocabulary and the grammar have some similarities, but still. So here he is now. It's May, and this is the day that he actually starts at the military academy in Brienne. He's going to go to two military schools. First, this one in Brienne, then later, when he's older, he's going to go to one in Paris when he's a teenager. But this is like day one of his military career, and this is Napoleon, or someday he will be Napoleon. For the time being, he's still Napoleone from Ajaccio. But eventually he will be the Napoleon Bonaparte that we all know of. And yeah, these transits are really striking. Remember, he's in a Leo perfection year, so the sun in the 10th is the sort of central figure here. And you see a joint Saturn and Mars retrograde square his sun opposite, this whole arrangement with a Mercury retrograde and an imminent new moon. So yeah, a really interesting, alienating start. and you can't call this a good experience or a bad experience. It's a hard time for a 9-year-old, although at the same time, not unlike his attitude towards his mother's style of rearing children, is, these hard knocks are going to serve him well. I mean, this education is going to make him something other than an impoverished Corsican aristocrat.
He'll thrive in spite of the challenges.
Yes, yeah.
And yeah.
Which is your classic, I mean, with diurnal charts, this is what you get with Saturn. It's not that it's easy, it's just that it tends to be more helpful. It actually allows for that investment of time to amount to something rewarding, as opposed to nocturnal charts where Saturn can be a bit more sort of devastating and close down whatever, cruel, and close down whatever sort of momentum someone has going. So there is a sort of fundamental way, generally speaking, the way Saturn functions as a transiting planet in diurnal nativities versus nocturnal nativities.
So both malefics retrograde square your ruler of the year equals being going through an extreme stress test.
That's right.
And of course, for a 9-year-old, I think this certainly qualifies. And this is the ruler of the ascendant too, going retrograde in the first house, which doesn't happen that often. So that's another thing that really makes this kind of extraordinary. This is a future general, future soldier, beginning their kind of martial path with Mars moving retrograde through the first house in its own sign.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll see with future transits that Napoleon is, generally speaking, not a happy man when Mars is in Scorpio. He does not like the transit of Mars through Scorpio, even though it's his rising sign and his chart ruler. It's rarely, I mean, if anything, this retrograde, the saving grace of this Mars retrograde is that it happens alongside the Saturn retrograde, which is a little more sort of useful for him. But it just goes to show, he shows up at this military academy with his thick Corsican accent, and he's a total outsider and not really considered properly French. And not an easy time for this poor kid. You there, Patrick?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I figured we were moving on to the next.
Okay. Yes. Sure. So we're gonna jump ahead to 1784. I mean, I've got them all. Well, I guess there's some things I can just say from the outset, like for instance, because this will prepare us for later. While he's still at the military academy, when he's in year 2, and I think this is the year that, this is around the time that he's introduced to artillery. With this birthday, he's turning 11 years old, which is a 12th house perfection year. And what happens is this is Venus retrograde in Leo, what I call the red 3. Now, in the 21st century, a red 3 Venus retrograde happens in Gemini, but 200 years earlier, it was happening in Leo. That's why we have that Venus interval system, for exactly this reason. So we can talk about the same part of the cycle, even as it moves from sign to sign over the centuries. This Venus retrograde is pretty important. It's always going to occur. Now, this is where the Venus synodic cycle sort of merges with the perfection cycle, because the Venus synodic cycle is 8 years. For those of you who follow us, every 8 years Venus will go retrograde in pretty much the same position over the course of his lifetime. But the perfection cycle is 12 years. So what this means is every time Venus is retrograde in Leo in Napoleon's solar return, he will always be in an air sign perfection year. All right. It's always going to be Libra, Aquarius, or Gemini. In this instance, it's Libra, which rules Venus. And this is apparently like he's been at the military school for a little over a year, and this is around the time that the whole working with artillery thing starts to happen for him, and there's some advantage despite the struggling he's got at the school. And this Venus retrograde is going to be important because it's going to pop up again, like in 1796 during the Italian campaign. In the summer of 1804, just before he crowns himself emperor. And then in the summer of 1812, as he very happy-go-luckily leads the Grand Armée into Russia to certain success.
Yeah. about
Uh,
that.
right. Spoiler alert. One of those things was a lie. Okay. So that's the 1780 birthday, but we're going to jump ahead to 1784, which is the year that he's going to first arrive in Paris. So this is 4 years later, and we still have a sun. Now we have a Sun Venus exterior conjunction in his solar return, and he's in an Aquarius perfection year, because like with the Venus retrograde in Leo years, the exterior conjunction years are also going to be in air sign perfection years. Whenever we have a Venus conjunct the sun, be it retrograde or an exterior conjunction, it'll be in an air sign perfection year. So now this is the year he's in an Aquarius perfection year now, and so Pluto. This is this Pluto kind of comes alive here, and he's about to go to Paris
So the
to begin the.
ingress was just coming to France, and
Yes,
then Pluto's conjunction to the more precise degree of his IC seems to coincide with his arrival in Paris, the capital of
yeah,
that place. So it's this is kind of the this reflects the difference between like the fourth whole sign house versus the degree of the IC. The fourth is sort of more general, the IC is more specific. In a similar way, Pluto's ingress was coming to the country, and then Pluto's approach to the IC is like coming to the actual city.
yeah. Yeah. And you can see even the day that he begins military school in Paris is the day Pluto is stationing direct in Aquarius,
Yeah.
in his Aquarius perfection. And that's exactly what you expect. The station will really sort of tell you what the whole thing is about. And yeah, this is Napoleon is really sort of earning his stripes now, and getting a lot of experience and what have you. So that's the Aquarius perfection year for you. Moving right along, this is the following year. Actually, I'm going to jump ahead to 1786 now, because he goes back. What happens here is he goes back to Ajaccio, to Corsica for the first time, and meets some of his brothers and sisters for the very first time. So here he is. He's 17. This is an Aries perfection year. This is the age of Saturn being conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. The Lord of the Year is here very close to the natal position. And this is his return to Ajaccio shortly after, like a month after his birthday. Go ahead.
Isn't this when he gets involved in like Corsican sort
That's
of
a little bit later.
political, just a little bit
Still
later? Okay,
he's
not
still
that return.
he's still a bit young. His father died. One thing I jumped over was
Oh
his
yeah, that's
father
right.
dying, which maybe I should have touched on. But now he comes back to Corsica to sort of handle some of the affairs, the family's finances and things like that. And he's got to go back and forth between Corsica and France to try and negotiate debts that are owed to his family, and a lot of stuff like that. So but yeah, he's not yet. That is going to happen about 2 years later, or 3 years later, where he gets
Yeah, I
involved.
couldn't remember the year. So I think that's just really remarkable again that so Pluto goes into Aquarius and begins this, episode of this new era in this new place, and his period of disconnection from family, and then Saturn actually moves into that house, and he has his father pass away. And of course, it was his father who originally brought him to France. So this is again why
This is
Scorpio rising really,
Yeah, this is
you know,
I've backtracked a bit. I did want to show that the chart for his father's death, which occurs in February of 1785, not long after he's gone to Paris to attend that military school. So he's still under that 1784 solar return that we were looking at a minute ago. No, not that one. This one. We're still looking at this Aquarius perfection year, with the Sun Venus, and look what happens when his father dies. It's literally the day that Saturn enters the perfected sign.
wow.
Right.
Also, wouldn't this be about 2 weeks after a solar eclipse in Aquarius?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, so the father passed away just 2 weeks then after a solar
We can.
eclipse in Aquarius in his 4th house.
I can find the exact date for that. Yeah, at 21 Aquarius, which is exactly, pretty much exactly opposite
Opposite
Napoleon's sun.
his own sun. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And it would have
wow,
been, yeah, and it was a total eclipse. It was a total eclipse on February 9th, 15 days earlier. Yeah.
wow.
Well spotted. Well
So
spotted.
yeah, so Scorpio rising is
Yeah, yeah.
it's a real rising sign. Like it would
Yeah,
have to be.
it keeps coming back to that. It just keeps coming back to that. Okay. Right. With that in mind, a yacht show leaves Corsica for Paris. Yeah, let's go to 1789 because this is when he starts getting into
Kind of radicalized.
to some extent. It's fair to say. Um, okay, so this is him at the age of 20. And 20 is a ninth house perfection year. So it's Cancer. So that Venus and Saturn come alive. Because Cancer is the perfected sign. It's not just that, okay, the moon is the lord of the year, but whatever planets are in Cancer, whatever planets transit through Cancer, sort of light up. And this is the year where he's going to start to fall out of favor with the Corsicans. I mean, he's going to remain a loyal Corsican for another 4 years after this, but this is where the trouble really starts. At first, he's with he really wants Corsican independence. He wants to bring the French Revolution to Corsica, which means that Corsica should sort of have political independence, be part of the French project, but to have its own political independence. But then over the course of like agitating, he's accused of being a troublemaker by a rival faction in Corsica. And then Pasquale Paoli, who had been the Corsican independence fighter during the war with France, like just before Napoleon was born, who's been in exile in England all these years, comes back to Corsica. And at first, the Bonapartes, are loyal to Paoli and want him to be their sort of their figurehead and leader in taking Corsica into independence. But that relationship is going to fracture over the next 4 years, and eventually lead to the Bonaparte family being
So
exiled.
it's kind of like Mars is in the 11th, kind of.
It's kind of like Mars is in the 11th, but it's also like Venus and Saturn are in the ninth, in the sense
Right.
that there's this bittersweet. There's a loyalty to Corsica, that and then a sort of like betrayal, by Corsica or of Corsica, or depends on who you ask. But it's this sort of bittersweet relationship to the whole idea of being Corsican. I mean, that's what this is all going to lead to is a total change in identity. Which is where we're going as Pluto moves closer and closer to opposition to his sun. And yeah, some of the transits for this period, I'll just put them up. Probably the two most important for this particular solar return. The first one is this one. Right, so he's in the Cancer perfection year. This is when he writes a plea to the French National Assembly in Paris, demanding that Corsica be given independent rights. He wrote it a month earlier, but this is when it's read in the French National Assembly, and you can see Venus opposite the Saturn at this point, coming up to the Moon, and then later that year, when Pasquale Paoli arrives back in Corsica. And and by now, the Sun and Mercury, the Sun being like the the hero of Corsica. This is when Paoli returns, and Napoleon and Joseph meet him soon after and sort of pledge their allegiance. But of course, that's not going to go very well.
Right.
Yeah,
that's and that's just after a new moon in Cancer, like about a week or so after.
Yeah, 2 days after.
Yeah, so it's
2 days
kind of
after.
in the aftermath of
Yeah.
that.
All right. Now we're going to jump ahead to is 92. Okay, because this is important. Something happens to him just before this date. Maybe I should open that up because this is really important. Going back to the movie. There's the movie shows Napoleon witnessing the execution of Marie Antoinette. That did not happen.
Yeah, I was gonna
Uh,
say that could not have happened.
it did not happen. But what Ridley Scott is really trying to show you is this moment and how this changes Napoleon, because this is a really important moment in his life. It's in the midst of the French Revolution is heading towards the terror. It's not quite there yet, but it's starting to surface. And the royal family has tried to escape France, and they've been caught right at just as they were going to cross the border and be safe with the Austrians, and now they're held in total suspicion. And within a few months from now, Louis is going to be executed, and about 14 months from now, Marie Antoinette will be executed. But Napoleon is still he's still a Corsican, but he's been in the French military. He's had to come back to France to sort of clear his name in yet another way, and he happens to be in Paris when they call it a militia, but it's really just a mob of Parisians with weapons mob the Tuileries Palace and attack the guards there and just butcher them mercilessly. It's like in no way a fair fight. And Napoleon is watching this happen, and he develops this tremendous loathing and fear for mobs. He really, and this will sort of come out later as he rises to political power. He's, he doesn't.
And yet, I mean, he sees that, and yet, he sees what happens to monarchs, right? He's seen how
Yes.
France handles this, and he, it's just alarming that like someone could seal this and still go through with putting a crown on their head and calling themselves an emperor. It seems very
Well, sure. And I mean,
bold.
when we get to that, that's a decade away. That's
Yeah.
literally that's 12 years away from here. I mean, you're absolutely right. But in the same way, I mean, he's going to be the guy who reinstates the Pope in French society. Despite not being terribly religious, out of a sort of cynical political maneuver. And in some ways, at least his rationalization for becoming emperor is also based on a kind of political expediency. But, he really gets into the role.
A little too much.
It's kind of hard. It's hard to go through all that and not start to believe.
And that's another kind of element of his Venus and Saturn in the 9th house, which is that, he was like legitimately raised as a Catholic, but he in his embrace of kind of like the secular ideals of the French Revolution, he also develops a kind of apathy or like you said, a kind of cynical sort of maybe political utilitarian sort of view towards it as well. So he kind of seems to vacillate in some ways, almost sort of like Henry VIII, in terms of being at times devout and at other times, completely sort of in aversion to it, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
In any case, didn't want to completely get you off track there, but I
No,
just
no.
the Saturn theme there in the 9th.
Yeah, absolutely. And note that transiting Saturn has just crossed his descendant. He's not the one in trouble right now. But also, I mean, this is amazing. Remember, when there's a Sun Venus exterior conjunction or an interior one, it means he's in an air sign perfection year. And at 23, he's
That's
back.
Libra.
He's back at Libra, right? Where you see this whole mess going on. But it's a few days before his birthday, so he's still in the Virgo perfection year, this Mercury on his Mars, and he's witnessing this violence. But the main thing is, okay, now Pluto is properly opposite his sun, and you can see Uranus is coming to this conjunction to his sun. And this is a process that began when he was 9 years old, and Pluto was just making its ingress into Aquarius in 1779. But now it's made this journey, and now we're starting to understand what that move in 1779 really meant. Like, you had to go another 13 years or whatever it's been before the transit even makes itself really apparent or obvious to you. And with Uranus on his sun, yeah, like, we can see that big changes are afoot for Napoleon as he approaches that birthday that happens just a few days later.
Well, yeah, and it is just so obviously, like, I kind of use Uranus and Leo opposite Pluto and Aquarius as kind of my astrological shorthand for the French Revolution and
Yes.
what that was. And so that is so interesting that this is when he develops his kind of fear of mobs, because I mean, really, Leo probably should fear Pluto and Aquarius, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Leo is centralized authority; it's monarchy, it's kings, etc. And Aquarius is like completely opposed to that. That's more distributed and in some ways democratic and anti-monarchical, anti-solar. So,
Yeah. And the other thing about that Pluto and Aquarius, remember that during the French Revolution, literally every country on France's border or frontier has declared war on the revolution.
right.
The terror and the Great Terror don't come about just because people are, have violent instincts and they've been just dying to chop everyone's heads off. In fact, Maximilian Robespierre got into politics to be a champion against the death penalty, which is just like,
Wow, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's kind of a fail, epic fail,
yeah,
in terms of, like, setting out to do something. But there is a reason. I mean, the reason Robespierre, caves to, the Great Terror as much as everyone, is that they're legitimately under siege from all these invading armies, and there are legitimately traitors to the revolution who surface, including the very king and queen when they try to escape France. So there's a tremendous sense of paranoia, like the whole world is caving down on them. And this is, I mean, it makes no excuse for the terror, but you have to
right.
understand, like just why did this happen? Why did this crazy, crazy thing happen? It's not in a vacuum. It's not just because people are bloodthirsty or, they've just been dying to chop each other's heads off. It's like, a real state of desperation is come about. And that is what Napoleon's seeing when the Swiss Guard are massacred,
Yeah,
these are, after all, literally Swiss soldiers who are there to protect the palace and
right. The
but
Terra, in my mind, the Terra, like Uranus Pluto is like the first phase of the revolution. The Terra is kind of like Saturn squaring it, basically.
mm,
Um, which sort of happens in the next
sure,
couple of
yeah.
years.
Yeah, I'd say that's absolutely right. But you can see already
Oh
things.
yeah.
Yeah. We're not at the terror yet, but you can see that the terror is coming. So, all right. So that's Napoleon at 23, and you can see also that Mars was in his solar return with that chart. So that when we get to, wait, this is the next one. All right. So this is important because now he's turning 24 and a lot has changed in his life. So now, like, in the solar return, Uranus is properly conjunct the sun, right? Like the previous
Mhm.
one, it was on this side of the sun. And this one, it's on this side of the sun. So the transit has occurred between 92 and 93. And keep in mind that he began the year with a Mars Saturn opposition right on his angles, but began his 23rd year. So what happened in the meantime? And basically, the whole thing back in Corsica came to a head.
Gonna say he gets banished, right?
His whole family gets banished. His whole family, and it's because, actually, it's really interesting. I'll go into this in a second. So this is um, before the 24th birthday. So he's still in this Libra perfection year. There's a Venus retrograde. We're in a red one Venus retrograde that goes from Gemini to Taurus. Okay, while he's in a Libra perfection year, so it's a little stronger. So literally, the consensus has changed. The Bonaparte family has always been loyally sort of Corsican. Their father fought for Corsican independence alongside Pasquale Paoli, but those days are over. They're considered to be, undesirables in Corsica, and the entire family is banished from the island under threat of death. And a lot of this is instigated actually by Napoleon's brother Lucien, who ironically is like the one identifiable sibling of Napoleon that we see in Ridley Scott's movie when it comes to the coup of 18 Brumaire. It's the one time like it's acknowledged that Napoleon has a sibling anywhere in the movie. You do kind of see his siblings in the background in certain scenes. For instance, Joseph was present also at the coup of 18 Brumaire, but Lucien is the brother who instigates. He's kind of a hothead, and it's his sort of speeches that get the whole Bonaparte family in trouble, and that's very interesting because you see this. This is a manifestation of something you see often. There is some controversy about Lucien's birthday. There are some sources that say he was born in March, but most of them say he's born in May with the Sun-Uranus natal conjunction in Gemini. Okay, which
Yeah.
and so he's the hothead who gets the family in trouble, and yet Napoleon is the one having the Uranus transit that mirrors Lucien's natal
Mm.
configuration.
Oh, they would both have Mars, Neptune, and Virgo.
Right. Yeah. And
Um,
and Lucien's the brother who followed Napoleon to the military academy at Brienne, but he didn't do so well because he had poor eyesight.
oh,
And
shoot.
so, but
Actually,
he
that
was,
was after a Mars retrograde in Virgo
yeah,
even.
yeah, yeah. He would have spent his time in utero with Mars retrograde in Virgo.
Yeah,
Mars
so he
retrogrades in Virgo. They're he's born 45 days after the direct station at 25 Leo. Mars retrogrades in Virgo are common. They happen every 15 to 17 years, generally speaking. Once in a blue moon and a radical sort of shift. It'll skip Virgo if there's a Mars retrograde at very late Leo, but that's very, very, very rare. Generally, you'll see them come up every 15 to 17 years. But yeah, he was born just after a Mars retrograde. And yeah, Lucien's a kind of a hothead and very, very revolutionary, more revolutionary than Napoleon at this point. But okay, so this happens, and the family has to leave Corsica, and they arrive, I think, in Lyon, France, or somewhere like that. Um, and Napoleon's got a sort of, the one thing they have, they're a family of 8. But I think Lucien isn't with them. The rest of all the other siblings and the mother arrive, and then Lucien joins them later, if I remember correctly. But the only thing they have, I mean, they are literally destitute. They're refugees. But Napoleon has been in the French army, and so he re-enlists, if you will, because it's the only way he's going to be able to feed this whole this massive family. He's the only one with any kind of credentials to do that kind of thing. And so that when he has that next birthday, a couple of months later, during like this is here we are now. Okay,
Mm.
entertain us. It's Uranus Sun opposite Pluto. And this is like from here on, he is no longer Corsican. From here on, he is a Frenchman. You got that the lovely Mars to Saturn. This is a transit that helps free up blockages. Mars to Saturn, always a good chart, always a good transit. Pretty much, I've yet to see a time when it wasn't.
Good for confronting fears, confronting, inertia,
Yeah,
and,
but
taking action.
taking action, getting something moving after a long
Kicking
period.
ass and taking names, yeah.
Yeah, so
Um,
things are blocked, and you manage to unblock them. Is a really good way to put it.
well, and that's so interesting too, given what he would do just a few months later
Yes,
after this date.
exactly. Yes. So this is where the sort of the military legend of Napoleon comes alive. There we are.
And this
2.
is while he's 24 at this point?
Yes, and this is something we see in Ridley's movie, although it's not entirely. For instance, Napoleon gets stabbed in the leg with a. What do you call those things? The gun knife things.
Oh,
The
bayonets.
bayonets. He gets bayoneted in the leg, in the thigh, I think, and you don't see that in the movie. But yeah, basically, um, the British are occupying Toulon, which is a port in the south of France, and Napoleon, being an artillery officer, figures out a way to get some cannons up on a hill by taking over storming this one British sort of fortress that's on a hill, taking it over, and then from there he can use his artillery to fire at the British ships in the bay and get the British out of Toulon, which he succeeds in doing. And this gets him promoted to brigadier general, I believe. You see, even in the movie, you see him being
Yeah.
promoted. And and so from here he starts to establish himself in the French military. He's useful. Keep in mind, because some of the French generals had betrayed the revolution. I won't go too much into that, but a number of French generals met the guillotine, and so this is an excellent environment to sort of move up in the ranks, as it were. There aren't a lot of other generals to block his way from being promoted, because a lot of them have met the national razor. So yeah.
It's I believe it. Now this would have probably happened before the past solar return, but it looks like the last solar eclipse might have happened in Leo before this event, around the time of that last solar return.
Let's have a
Am
look
I
here.
correct about that, or no?
No. There
No.
was one at 28 Aquarius.
Okay, so going across that,
Yeah.
certainly the next lunar eclipse would have probably taken place in Leo.
Yeah, we're heading towards there being eclipses in Leo. You can see there's one in February at 26 afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those things I would be taking into account, is that right as the node is moving into the 10th house, he receives this promotion.
Yeah.
It doesn't line up with the eclipses, but maybe more generally with the nodal position. But yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. So from there, let's go to the next. Well, actually, just before that next birthday, something does happen.
He gets arrested.
Yes. Where is he here? There he is. He's arrested on August.
He kind of has this buzz going around him after too long.
Yeah, but he makes friends with Augustin Robespierre, who is the brother of Maximilian Robespierre, who's the Great Terror is going to end in July of 1794, when Robespierre, both Robespierre brothers and Louis Saint-Just and a couple of other associates are sent to the National Razor. And because Napoleon was chummy with Augustin Robespierre, Augustin was one of his sort of benefactors leading up to this, Napoleon is thrown in jail for a little while. Not long, like a week or something, but it happens to be the week that he turns 25. It happens in the middle of his birthday week. So this is him. He's suspended from the military and is arrested and thrown in jail. And there was some risk of him being guillotined. But he escapes. He clears his name. He's not. They need him, first of all. They need him, and he's shown that he's useful.
Sorry, this is kind of what you meant by he doesn't like Mars and Scorpio.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because he's really, he's doing his best, damn, and he's already been rejected by Corsica, and now it's like he can't declare loyalty to anyone without them betraying him. That's another spoiler alert when we get to his married life. But anyway, but no, I mean, it's really true. He's always declaring this fierce love and loyalty to entities or people who do not reciprocate. Quite the contrary. Gee, I wonder what his 7th house looks like. Anyway. Yeah, poor dude, man. Poor dude. Who knows how things could have been different if people had just been nicer to him. Anyway, so a few days after he's thrown in jail, he does get out, but he has his birthday in between all that, which is this one. All right, so that's his birthday, and he gets out of jail a few days after this. So he's 25. He's in a second house perfection year. Jupiter is still following him around. The interesting thing about people who have Jupiter in the 1st or the 12th is they'll go
Does
through a
it
certain part
follow
of
the
they'll go
sign?
yeah, they'll go through a certain part of their life where Jupiter is in whatever perfected sign of the year is happening. But this is going to eventually sort of slip away from him. It's not always going to be in the perfected sign as he moves on, which is interesting to monitor.
Right.
But okay, so this is him. He gets out of jail, and then he's trying to succeed for a little while. He doesn't get his next big break until after the following birthday. So let's look at the next birthday.
So this is his 3rd house year.
This is his 3rd house year. He's 26, so it's a Capricorn year. You can see Jupiter retrograde there, along with the node right on his moon. The nodes straddling his Saturn moon, if you will, and Jupiter on his moon, and Saturn is in the 8th, square his Mars, and he's going to do something pretty brutal here, isn't he?
Right. Yeah, it's really not that long after that. He basically volunteers or voluntold to quell this royalist uprising.
Yeah.
And so
and this is shown in the movie.
Yeah.
Right. So this is him at 20, the 26th birthday. You can see, like, Mars is coming up to natal Mars. It's squared by the Saturn, to his natal Mars and transiting Mars. And he fires cannon. It's the whiff of grape shot is what he calls it, right? He fires grape shot at these protesting royalists and just massacres them.
Right. It doesn't seem like it would be that revolutionary today, but yeah, turning just cannons on people in the street, it typically wasn't done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty brutal. But this basically, this gave the directory, this confidence, in him. This is kind of what really earned him his. I mean, I know you and I have kind of differed on this, but I feel like this is really the incident that, even though Toulon like gets him buzz, I feel like it's this incident that really, definitively puts away any kind of question about his loyalties or his identity. Like, he is a Frenchman from here on out. Like, because this even gets him, popular with the people who are against, the royalist faction, the revolutionary,
the Jacobins,
right.
Well, this is and it's because of this that he's even going to be in those parties that he's going to when he that's the way he meets Josephine in the movie anyway. The story that's shown in the movie that the family was looking for a sword that belonged to Josephine's husband who had been executed during the terror, and Napoleon somehow got that back to them. That shows up in books. That apparently did happen, something to that effect, and that might be how he got closer to Josephine. But certainly, to your point, if it isn't for the 13 Vendémiaire, whiff of grape shot thing, and the sort of the trust that the directory puts in him, he's not going to be hobnobbing with the kind of people that Josephine hangs out with.
Right. Well, and if you look at, the ruler of the year at that point was Saturn, and you can see that the North Node is right there on Saturn, Jupiter opposing Saturn in this time.
Yeah.
This is it's a time when he really kind of earns rank, with with the government.
Yeah.
And this is puts him on a whole new trajectory or accelerated trajectory into the kind of upper echelon of his society. So it's really this kind of through a brutal act, through kind of this is how he does it really, like a cannon. He is a cannon in history.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Right. So from here, not only does he do that, but he marries Josephine, and some of the early part of his campaign in Italy is gonna come out of this. So he's still in the Saturn perfection year. So he's
He's
handled the
going
royal.
abroad, going on holiday, to
Well, in a
kill
matter of speaking, yeah. What's that line in Full Metal Jacket? I want to travel to foreign lands and meet interesting people
me.
and kill them. um, yeah, great. Yeah, it's too bad Kubrick didn't do the Napoleon movie, but anyway,
Right.
um, Full Metal Jacket's awesome. So yeah, here we are. This is still that same year. He's still in the third house perfection year, and he marries Josephine in March of 1796. And she remains, of course, a totally devoted wife. No problems there whatsoever. Okay, kidding again.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert: she's terrible as a wife, anyway. Um, and But yeah, they get married, and then he immediately goes off to fight his Italian campaign. Um,
Nice honeymoon. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, nice honeymoon. She does go to Italy at some point, and she can't stand it and stuff. But he does have her go out there at one point during the summer, during the Venus retrograde summer in Leo. In between all this, so Uranus is now in Virgo, and in fact, this is a famous battle where I think he carries the flag across the bridge. Is that at Lodi or is that at Arcole?
Uh,
I get these things. Arcole's later in the year. But this is going to be a year-long sort of hard slog in Italy. It's totally going to make his reputation even more than firing grape shot at Parisian protesters.
right.
This is
Well, and that's something to keep in mind in general about the Italian campaign is it was seen as like pretty successful. Like it was
yeah,
like win after win after win, a kind of a hit after hit, a banger after a banger,
yeah,
it's just sort of piling on. This idea of him being this kind of you know uh, lucky charm almost for
right.
French interests.
And if I was Napoleon's astrologer and we're looking at his chart and his transits and his perfection cycle, okay, so you're in a Capricorn perfection year and Saturn's in Gemini. Well, maybe you want to wait till Mars, the exalted planet of Capricorn. Maybe you want to wait before that comes into Capricorn when things you do stand a much greater chance of success. Capricorn didn't help him, choose a good, marriage date or anything like that. Saturn square Uranus, give me a break. When it comes to the military campaign, yeah, what a great day to start what's going to be this triumphant achievement where you really, start to be known as a military genius.
People are saying in the comments, we can see 22 are watching, but can't see any comments. Wonder why? And someone responded, "We're shy." I realize we're putting a lot of information at you, so I don't blame you if you don't feel particularly active in the comments. But feel free to ask questions as we go on. We'll try to address them as we can, but obviously we're going through a lot of material here, so
Yeah.
don't
There's
sweat it.
Yeah. We didn't get many comments during the forecast episode too, because it's a different kind of format where we're talking about. Maybe we'll take some questions at the very end if we've confused people, but we have the episode mapped out to some extent. So yeah, it's I'm not going back and looking at questions as much. Okay, so this is the another big battle in the campaign leading up to his birthday. And then he has the actual birthday, which is this one. Right. And here we are again at a Venus retrograde. It's in the middle of the Italian campaign. I know he's actually really depressed and despondent at this time. Mars has retrograded from Capricorn back into Sagittarius, which is interesting. Like from the previous time, like so this was this Mars had gone retrograde.
So that was a pre Mars retrograde, huh?
Yeah,
That's interesting.
exactly. At 3
Usually,
degrees. At 3
usually,
degrees.
military expeditions don't go so well by the attacking force at a Mars retrograding in the retrograde station, but But yeah, it is a bit more complicated than that because it does eventually, go
Yeah,
direct in Capricorn again.
yeah.
Um,
And it is, but I mean, what's funny is like it is kind of like Lodi is or Lodi, whatever you call it, is quite successful. But then the next few months until Arcole in November, it really is quite a slog, and he's quite depressed. Uh, he misses Josephine, although he doesn't believe she's cheating on him yet. It's actually he's quite low at this point. You can see Mars and Saturn opposite again on the birthday, and it's a hard slog. Like he does make his reputation here, but he's not like an actual like happy guy when all this is happening. And I'll just show we'll come right up here. And when he does win, it is something of a shock to people, precisely because it's not like he just sort of went in there and everything suddenly opened up. So this is Arcole in November. And yeah, at this point, he is doing very well. I think that the previous one was Bassano. Mars was still in
Capricorn.
Capricorn, and he's
And
he's
now
start
it's direct.
yeah except it's direct and it's going, it's things are going his way, so that by the time he gets to Arcole, he's got the Austrians on the run. He's fighting around the mountains there at the base of the Alps, and then after Arcole, you get Rivoli. And even today in Paris, there's a bridge named after the Battle of Rivoli. It's like Austerlitz. It's one of these great Napoleonic battles.
So in this particular one as well, we see Uranus is like exactly conjunct his Mars.
Yeah. And
So
the sun
oh,
is
I know
the
Jupiter
sun is
too.
the sun is in the perfected sign, and even this you can't underestimate it.
Yeah.
Oh wait, is it still in the? Oh, no, he's had his birthday. I'm getting confused now.
1797.
Because
He would
6,
be
he's 27, 24, 25. 20. No, I'm wrong. It's Aquarius now. It's Aquarius now because he had his birthday after Lodi, and now he's in an Aquarius perfection. Right. That's why Arcole. That's because by Arcole, Mars is in Aquarius, and now it's in the perfected sign here, even though it's not exalted.
So then after like the Italian stuff, um, he makes his way to he starts planning for this Egyptian expedition, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, oh yeah, one question, because I have the same database because you gave it to me. Why did you include the first parachute jump from the
Oh,
balloon?
yeah. Just because it's something that's happening in Paris while he's, like Campo Formio's being signed, and he's there for. I believe he witnesses it. He's around at the time.
Oh,
So I just wanted, it's not unlike I have things happening in the French Revolution that he wasn't there for Robespierre's Cult of the
yeah, I was
Supreme
just
Being
curious. Like,
Festival.
that's
Yeah.
such a seemingly innocuous.
It's not innocuous.
Expedition.
These balloon jumps are like the hot air balloon. That actually, this is something Chris and I are going to be talking about. We're doing an episode on Pluto and Aquarius, but the advent that the Montgolfier brothers showed the hot air balloon, and then their competitor, the Charles, showed the hydrogen balloon, one after the other in the 1780s. And then by 1794, at the Battle of Fleurus, just before the Great Terror ends, the hot air balloon is used for the first time in combat.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so
All right. So
like this
it
is,
is a
yeah,
thing.
so now we've got a parachuter, the first parachuter jumping. This is really important, like enlightenment. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze.
Bless you. um, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Also worth considering that
Excuse me.
Pluto isn't an air sign. for what it's worth.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
Uranus, give me a break. Uranus opposite Pluto, and they're both with the nodes.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the reason I included that in there. I
Gotcha.
think it's
Okay.
important to the timeline. But yeah, we're going to jump ahead to Egypt now. Whoops. All right, we'll go here. Okay, so he's turning 28 here, which is a Pisces perfection year.
Yes, 28.
Yeah, 28. It's another one of these
Wait. I thought he was born in 1760. Yeah, 17.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Yeah, you're right.
28.
Yeah,
28.
yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, quite all right. He's got another one of these Mars-Sun conjunctions that happen quite a bit over the course of these solar returns that we see. This can happen every 15 to 17 years as well, and it's pretty consistent the way it plays out. Put it this way: this is 15 years away from 1812.
Right.
Time passes quickly, doesn't it?
So this is really important for understanding, I think, Napoleon's Saturn placement, because one of the basic things we might be able to say about Saturn in the ninth house is encountering problems, very generally described problems abroad, in
Yes.
foreign places, or finding reaching the limitations of how far you can go, reaching kind of obstacles or humbling experiences in foreign places. So there's this idea, I don't know, when you kind of look at this whole period, I feel like the expedition that Napoleon made to Egypt kind of could be seen as like representing him going a bridge too far. And it almost harkens back to these sort of Greek stories of once you crossed a body of water, you've gone too far, and now you're kind of setting yourself up for kind of a comic retribution.
Sure.
You're gonna suffer for your hubris. And so I think it's relevant to point out that as Napoleon was making plans to invade Egypt to get at the British, basically in a different way, he he's entering his Saturn return period, where Saturn has now entered the sign of his natal ninth, and we can see that Saturn is making its way, creeping up to the exact degree position of his natal Saturn. So nothing to keep in mind through
Sure.
But
this is still like he's going to leave for Egypt not too long before his 29th birthday, but this is the solar return that represents his leaving for Egypt. And I fully agree with you about the Saturn in the ninth, but there's another element to Saturn and to the ninth house in this, which you kind of hinted that with referring to the Greeks. Napoleon wants to be Alexander the Great. Okay. He's read about Alexander the Great, and he wants to, at this point, he's thinking about not just going to Egypt, but taking the French army all the way to India, right? Like, like Alexander, and taking it away from the British. Where actually his future nemesis, Wellington, is over in India around this time, fighting for, king and empire and all that stuff. Okay. So yeah, this is his birthday before he leaves for Egypt, and then he lands at Egypt in July of 1798, a month before, or like 6 weeks before that birthday, where he's going to turn 29. You can see the Saturn return creeping up there.
Conjunction in the ninth, yeah.
Right. So he goes from there to this big battle not long after, against the Mamelukes, the Battle of the Pyramids. They call it the Battle of the Pyramids. You can see the pyramids off in the distance. It's not really the Battle of the Pyramids, but you can see he's in the Pisces perfection year, and Mars in Pisces is opposite his natal Mars. And from this battle, then
he starts getting his ass handed to him.
Yeah. Well, this is when
So
the French fleet sinks the day Mars stations retrograde opposite his Mars in a Pisces perfection year. The British Navy sinks the entire French fleet.
I thought this was also called the Battle of the Nile. On August 1st, 1798. And
I always hear it's the port of Abu Qir. I always hear it called the Battle of Abu Qir.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, it is so perfect though too. Like we've noted before on different episodes how like the Mars retrograde station tends to be not good for the force that is kind of initiating the aggression or that is considered to be like the favorite to win. That there always seems to be this way that and you can look into ancient cases of this and more modern cases of this, that like Mars retrograde, when Mars is stationing retrograde, that like tends to be bad for like initiating attacks, and there tends to be a way in which it's considered to be like an overstep for the initiating the aggressor, the belligerent. And so it is so perfect that not only is Saturn going to be kind of inching its way up to his Saturn return the ninth, but then that Mars return, rather that Mars opposition is stationing opposite his Mars, as he's kind of going maybe a step too far and getting into more than he can really handle. And then do you have the battles like after this?
Yeah.
So like,
well, after this though, he has his birthday. Not long after Abu Qir, he has
okay,
his birthday, and he goes into an Aries perfection year.
so then Mars is actually
The Lord of the
the
Year now.
ruler of the yeah. So then the bad news kind of continues. There's a revolt against him on October 21st of 1798. They call it the Cairo Revolt. That was
Okay.
kind of when they
For some
basically
reason, I don't
knew
have
that.
that.
Basically, it's
October
when
which? October 20.
October 21st, 1798.
Okay.
The revolt of Cairo. It seemed, I mean, from my impression reading this, reading about this event, is that it was kind of when Napoleon realized that he was not going to be able to, have cooperative. He
Right.
wasn't going to have the natives basically, go along with what he wanted to do. And look at that Saturn position.
Mhm.
I know he was in a martial perfection year, but Saturn is literally just a few minutes off from his natal Saturn position, almost to the exact degree, really highlighting its natal significance in terms of representing barriers and this idea of like rejection, because the specific way that the people in Cairo kind of stirred up a lot of sentiment against him, not just because the French soldiers were kind of assholes, but also because they try to paint him as being like against religion. They distributed these pamphlets basically saying he's against Christianity, and he's against Allah, and he's against
Right.
Judaism. Like that, these French people are completely irreligious and godless, and so that's again a really interesting manifestation of that Saturn in the ninth house, given those sort of religious themes. One sort of positive thing that came out of Napoleon's expedition in Cairo was that he also took along like he also wanted to kind of advance like our understanding of Egyptology, and so there were a bunch of like
Mhm. Well, there's no
scientists
such thing as Egyptology. He's he's
until
he's
that point,
he's
right?
about to help invent it.
Yeah, so there's like a bunch of like scientists basically that come along with the military, and that's sort of where we isn't that where we eventually get a hold of things like the
The
Rosetta
Rosetta
Stone
Stone.
and
Yeah, yeah. The Rosetta Stone is discovered in 1799. Not too long before he abandons everyone. Uh, but yeah, this
right.
these are
Yeah,
these
the
are
movie depicts the reason for his leaving as, as I didn't know if that was true or not.
Oh, that because of Josephine?
Yeah, in the movie, it depicts him as leaving
Yeah.
Egypt because he finds the headline about Josephine dancing with some guy.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, no, I mean, he does it is while he's in Egypt that he learns that she's not, faithful to him, and maybe it has a hand in it, but I've seen a number of historians say, like, "No, that's not why he leave," like, that's, the reason he leaves is because he sees it's a failure, he's worried about his reputation back in France, and he's thinking politically. Which I think is likely, but certainly, he he does go back and the whole scene of him, confronting Josephine. I mean, that is, maybe one of the truer things from the movie that actually did sort of happen more or less that way. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I'm showing different highlights from Napoleon at 29 doing his Saturn return. Uh, um, this is a particularly brutal day at the end of the siege of Acre when he has so many prisoners that he can't feed, that he has them all shot, and this is one of the things that uh, when after his era is gone, and even actually when he's alive and in power, this is one of the things that people sort of speak of as one of the worst things he ever did, is this massacre. So yeah, following that, a little bit after that, sometime in July of 1799, the Rosetta Stone is found. There we are, and then he has his next birthday. Here. And this is the birthday. This is his 30th birthday. So now he's in a seventh house perfection year. Um, Venus in the 12th. He's got to find his way back home somehow.
right. Um,
Yeah.
but even though he kind of comes out of Egypt sort of, a failure, they just kind of, I don't know,
Yeah, no, he kind of, yeah, he
brushes
bluffs,
that off.
he bluffs it really nicely, and he's celebrated as a hero when he gets back. People don't really, he basically abandons his entire army in Egypt. There's a whole army he leaves behind. I hope he learns never to abandon an army again. Spoiler
Yeah, that'd be
alert, he
bad.
will. Yeah, that would be really bad if he did. So yeah, not long after his 30th birthday, like a week after his 30th birthday, he boards a frigate and he makes his way back to France and leaves his army behind. And they eventually come to, a pretty tough negotiation with the British. The British come in there. They disarm the French and they sort of take over Egypt. At one point, the would-be Egyptologist scholars who've collected all these artifacts, the British are going to confiscate some of those, but eventually they let the scholars bring some of the stuff back with them. France and Britain basically get to decide who steals what from the Egyptians. It's
Yeah.
and this is really, I mean, it's so illustrative of the Egyptian situation. Like, they're really relieved when the British come in and throw the French out, but then eventually they're asking the French to come in and throw the British out.
Uh,
It's like they can't win, and neither is a particularly appealing, imperial power. All right, so now he's 30.
I feel like this is kind of when he goes into his like political era,
Yes,
because
yeah, this
before
is
this he's sort of more strictly, you know,
a military guy. Yeah,
military guy, but then he kind of pivots, he does this sort of rebrand into well, now I'm just gonna, be the leader of everything now. That's it. This what
that's
seems
right.
to be the theme of these coming years. So that's so interesting that the coup, basically where he overthrows the directory and becomes the first consul, This is happening with Saturn right on his midheaven. Eclipses would have just recently happened in his first house. Well, what perfection year is he in at this point? 30. So
He's in seventh. He's in the seventh. So
so
it's
did Venus go retrograde?
Venus. Yeah, Venus is just stationing direct in Libra when when the coup happens. It's 2 days before the coup. So yeah, Venus has been retrograde in the 12th house, and it's just stationing direct when he goes into the National Assembly. There's a sort of an organized coup within the directory to close the directory and create a new 3-man governing body.
So, and this is what they call the bloodless coup, right?
Right. And Napoleon's brother Lucien, who I showed earlier, the guy, the Gemini with the Sun conjunct Uranus, he's the speaker, the house, if you will, of the National Assembly. And so you see him, it's depicted in the movie, although not the way I've always read about it. The movie makes it look like Lucien is kind of like pretending to take a stand to get, like, threatening Napoleon's life if he ever betrays France. But everything I know about and that I've read about Lucien is that when he actually pulls a sword, points it at his brother, and says, "I would gladly take my brother's life if he betrayed France," or something to that extent. He means it. he's like, look, you're my brother, but I will stab you if you betray France. Whereas the movie makes it look like he kind of nods and winks at his brother, like, look, I had to do that for uh, optics, if you will.
So we should probably be aware then when someone looks like they're going to do a coup, astrologically, that's going to be some combination of like eclipses around your first, Saturn in your 10th, Venus retrograde for good measure. I don't know. Just keep that in mind. That's a good thing to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the other thing about this is, like, Napoleon is going in with these two other guys, Sieyès and another guy. And he's supposed to be like the junior party in this triumvirate, but it very quickly becomes apparent that he's going to be the first consul, that he's going to be the guy in charge. Really,
Right.
by the time the coup happens, even, this is like, it's when they're organizing the coup that it becomes obvious he's going to be like the major dude.
Right. I think
Yeah.
another thing to point out here too is the fact that Pluto, has recently made, a shift out of Aquarius and is in Pisces, moving
Yes.
back into Aquarius. And this is kind of the next phase really of Napoleon's life. We already kind of were able to break down the Pluto and Aquarius period, but the Pluto and Pisces period is
Yeah.
really this
It's 5.
Napoleon's political activities.
Right. It's 5 days from stationing direct at 0 Pisces. So yeah,
Trying. Good.
it's 5 days away from stationing direct at 0 Pisces. So during his Egyptian period was when Pluto was going, between Aquarius and Pisces. But it's with Brumaire that it's firmly stationing direct in Pisces for the first time and not going back into Aquarius. Got it? Okay.
Yeah, so that might be worth knowing as well, as in terms of like, how does a Pluto and Aquarius period end? Well,
Yeah.
essentially like this, and that might not necessarily be good, depending. But
Well, Napoleon says right around this time that the revolution is over and I am the revolution.
yeah, that's not ominous at all.
No,
Um,
not at all.
well, yeah, I mean
Ominous schmominous.
yeah, that's quite interesting. So we get like revolutions with Pluto and Aquarius, and then in like Pluto and Pisces we get like empires.
Yeah, and the coalition wars. Ironically, Napoleon's going to kind of bring Europe together for quite a in order to defeat him. I mean, that's the funniest thing about this next period between now and 1815 is Britain, Austria, Russia, Prussia, and also like Denmark, Sweden. All these different countries are gonna you know, go into like they're going to have to negotiate with each other and form like these tenuous alliances just to take him on.
Well, and that's super interesting too when we consider that like part of Napoleon's goal was to create like a pan-European sort of political entity. I mean, in a way, the EU was
Yes.
kind of the ultimate
Yeah.
realization of Napoleon's idea. And actually, funnily enough, Napoleon's idea of a unified Europe does not include the UK. Um,
Right.
yeah, he's like everyone, you know, yes, France, yes, Germany, yes, Italy, yes, yeah, no England. England, stay out of it. And so, interestingly, the kind of post-Brexit EU is even closer to, you know, the you
Right.
know, this is actually what Napoleon would have preferred is an EU without the UK.
Yeah.
Uh,
We'll probably have an EU without France soon, though. Who
yeah,
knows?
well, yeah. So that's an interesting idea, though, that Pluto and Pisces then would have this sort of new kind of transitional factional
Yeah.
separation potential with that transit. So anyway, um
Yeah, it's going to force all these unlikely alliances, and create ultimately create the concert of Europe and more or less peace in Europe until the First World War, if you don't include the Crimean War.
and
Um,
honestly, sorry to cut you off there, Nick.
no,
Honestly, that's I feel like that's another way we can interpret Venus in the ninth house. You know, even though he even though we can see Saturn as being like, you know, troubles abroad, Venus in the ninth would also speak to the desire to unify or or
yeah,
or you know, bring together foreign um foreign places or foreign peoples. And so that's another way we can sort of see that kind of pan-European dream, you know, in
yeah.
his chart.
Yeah, although when we get to very shortly, we're going to come to a solar return that really highlights that Venus,
Okay,
and
yeah, let's talk
in
about
in a really special way that
that.
we definitely want to spend some time on.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so all that happens, and now we've got Napoleon going into the 19th century, which is okay. So there's this birthday. This is yet another Sun Venus conjunction, just like back in 1792. But now he's in a Gemini perfection year. He does have an important battle in 1800 Marengo, which is actually when he's still in his 30th perfection year. So I'll just show that quickly. He winds up, I think, naming his favorite horse Marengo after this battle, and this is another one of these legendary Napoleon battles, maybe one of the top 5, top 10 that people rate in terms of him being all legendary, and I think this is the one that's fought in the Alps. There's a famous painting by Jacques Louis David of Napoleon on his horseback in the Alps, and I think that depicts this period here.
Hmm.
Like he thinks he's Hannibal. And then after that, he's got that.
Yeah,
There's all this peace happening leading up to Amiens. There's Amiens, but I'm just getting a little ahead of myself. He survives an attempt on his life when Saturn's conjunct his sun. He's still in the Gemini perfection year. Remember, at his solar return, there'd been a Venus Sun conjunction there.
wow.
And yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's a bomb that blows up. Mars is on his Uranus, and a bomb blows up and kills other people, but not him. He survives.
damn.
Um,
How about when he proclaimed himself first consul? That's in like 1802. I don't know if that's too far ahead.
yeah, I guess I could. I mean, I'm maybe covering a little too much here. I don't have what's the date he declares himself first consul?
That would be August 2nd, 1802.
Okay. Okay. All right. So that's coming up to the solar return I want to talk about anyway. So this is like, even though it happens in 1802, this is the birthday I want to talk about,
Wow.
1801, because this birthday, it's not just that he's going to declare himself a first consul. This is also the year that he's going to sign the Treaty of Amiens with Britain and have a full year of peace. I mean, by the time of his next solar return, they're in the middle of Amiens, but this is the solar return that signifies the signing of Amiens. And it's during that peace, during that 1 year of peace between 1802 and 1803, that he's going to do all those administrative things that he's really, totally rewrite, Napoleonic law. I mean, he doesn't write the law, but he instigates. He gets, he gets
Right.
scholars and thinkers to do it. But he approves all the ideas. He's totally the catalyst for it to happen. And this is okay. Now, this is the thing about coming back to the Venus synodic cycle and perfection years. Okay, he's having every 8 years. You'll always have a Venus return because he's turning 32. The age of 32 is always a Venus synodic return and a Mars synodic return. No matter who you are, on your 32nd birthday, you'll have both those planets making a synodic return from the natal positions. And then this is, it's just interesting that his sun is straddled by Jupiter and Saturn. This is
Yeah.
really, really dignified here.
And this is when this is going to be the year that he basically appoints himself as the leader for life. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But he's also, with this, he's now in a Cancer perfection year, having a Venus return. So it's not like he has a Venus return every 8 years, but this is the first time in 24 years that he's had a Venus return while he's in a Cancer perfection year. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
peace abroad.
Yeah, no, this is the 1 year of his adult life. The other time that he did this was like the year before he got sent off to school. When he was 8 years old, he had a transit perfection like this, but I don't know anything about him at the age of 8. Maybe he just had fun being an 8-year-old. But this is the first time and the only time in his adult life. He won't live long enough for this to repeat itself. So this is the one time in his life that he's got a Venus synodic return happening while he's in the Cancer perfection year. And yet all this stuff happens. The peace treaty, that everyone sort of returns everyone else's captured land. Like Britain had, for instance, I've been living in Cape Town, South Africa. Cape Town had been, run by the Dutch, but the French had conquered the Dutch, and therefore Britain wanted to take away any territories that the French could claim by virtue of having conquered the Dutch. So they came to Cape Town in 1795, and where we live in Cape Town, our house in Cape Town is literally on the battlefield of where that battle happened in 1795. But then with Amiens, Cape Town was restored to, well, the Dutch/French, but then when war broke out again, the British felt they had to come back and take Cape Town a second time in a battle called Blouberg in 1806, and that's why from then on South Africa was occupied and taken over by the British. So like a lot of these things are happening all over the world. It's totally changing the Caribbean and of course one thing lead to another. The Louisiana Purchase for Thomas Jefferson. There are things that are changing in Southeast Asia with regard to different Dutch or French or British colonies. So yeah, a lot of things are sort of getting rearranged in a way. And this big piece that, while it only holds for a year, so much is accomplished in this time. And yeah, it's when he consolidates his power as well.
Does that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction take place in a fire sign?
Or
does it happen in the early degrees of Virgo?
I want to say it does happen. No, it must happen in the fire sign. Let me just, I'll put this on a clock. There's that Jupiter-Saturn. Let's just go ahead week by week. No, it does happen in Virgo.
It must happen in Virgo.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that it's still, you have Jupiter and Saturn surrounding, his sun at the time of the solar return, looking very much like, the picture of, he's being given kind of the cosmic keys to the kingdom in a sense.
Yeah, it's funny that
when we consider that.
I was just going to say Jupiter does go back into Leo and then back into Virgo before it does
Mhm.
finally make this conjunction. It looks like it only happens properly in July of 1802. Yeah, after
Gotcha.
Amiens. After Amiens, of course. Amiens is May of 1802.
Gotcha. The this is especially interesting given that he had it was when Saturn was like conjunct his midheaven that he sort of became first consul in the first place, and then it's like Saturn moves closer to his sun, and this is when he is able to make
Right.
that a permanent position. But he doesn't even
Right.
stop there.
Yeah, no, he's
um,
he's gonna he's gonna take that further as well. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is Amiens being signed in March of 1802. So he's in that 1801 solar return chart, and then he's going to have his 1802 solar return, and then war will break out again in 1803 because Amiens really only lasts, I think, a year and 2 months. But yeah, I find this particular solar return just is just dynamite, don't you
Yeah.
think? I mean,
No,
it's
well, I think when you lay out mathematically that, is the only one of the only times this could happen, and that,
yeah,
the most conventional interpretation of that placement is like peace.
yeah,
And that's what
exactly.
happens. It's yeah, that's
Right after,
yeah,
like you
bullseye.
said, like he's gone through the whole Saturn part of what Cancer means, but now this is a bit more of the Venus part of what Cancer means.
Right.
There's peace. He's going to improve society. I've been told that it was thanks to the Napoleonic Code is the reason that we have the standard of having birth times
Both
on birth
times.
certificates
Yeah.
in Europe. I've tried to verify that from other sources. This is something that was told to me years ago. But I certainly haven't disproven it, and it seems to be true. Like if it
Well,
wasn't,
France has
yeah,
it,
yeah, France
has
does, yeah, as does Germany, as any country conquered by Napoleon does. That's the real, apart like Scotland does. I don't know why they weren't conquered by Napoleon, but maybe they just did it to be, contrarian to the English. But in England, it's not typically recorded. I see some isolated incidents where it is, but generally it's not. And
So, since we're on the
Russia, it's
topic
not.
of
But
the Napoleonic Code, we have the date that was enacted. That was March 21st, 1804.
okay, is that also? I might not have that in my thing as well. Yeah, I do. Oh, March 21st, 1804. That's the day of the code because there's something else that happens that day that's really important. There's
Okay.
something else that happens that day really important. We don't want to jump the gun there.
Okay.
I mean, we're getting very detailed here. Should I'm gonna no, we should look at these different solar returns. Okay. Um, but feel free to redirect me if you don't like where I'm,
Oh, no, no, no,
going.
that's fine.
Um, but yeah, I just think we've gone to this much detail. We don't want to start sort of skipping
Right,
things now because we're in the real like Napoleonic era now. We went through all
right.
his childhood and everything, and the reason we did that, the reason we've been so careful, is because we want to show these sort of repeating themes, or like I just showed with that one solar return we just looked at, like when you get those once in a lifetime types of perfection years, it's really really notable.
Mhm.
All right, so this is his birthday, turning 33. So he's in a Leo perfection year again. And you can see like now now Saturn is on his Jupiter and Saturn are on his Mars Neptune, and this is the solar return that signifies A, he's going to go back to war, and B, he's going to have someone executed that's really gonna or wait, the execution is still over a year away. This isn't the year he has him executed, but this is the year he's going to go back to war with Britain. And
Right, well, the next series of solar eclipses would be square Mars.
right,
So, yeah, the because in a Leo perfection, you wanna pay special attention to the transit of the sun, especially the solar eclipses, and so you can see that based on where the nodes were in that solar return, they'd be happening in Virgo, that would be square, Mars and Gemini.
okay, hold on a sec. I'll go back to this. The nodes, the south node's on his Mars, yeah.
Yeah, and then so about a month later, there would be solar
There'd be
eclipses
eclipses.
in Virgo and Pisces, and they would square Mars, which would have gone further in Gemini.
Right.
Like
Um, yeah.
if you were my client, I'd be like, yeah, based on what's going on, I would say like in September, is kind of when things
Right.
are kicking off
Sure. Sure.
for more martial engagements.
Right. So from here, this is just before war breaks out again. Napoleon knows war is going to break out, and he needs money. So he signs over this big piece of territory in America and signs it over. I think Monroe is the guy negotiating it. James Monroe, the future president, the future doctrine guy. Although the doctrine is really a John Quincy
Really,
Adams
I
thing.
thought I was
John,
gonna say I thought Jefferson was the one who approved it finally, right?
the Louisiana Purchase. Jefferson is president, but Monroe
Yeah.
is his negotiator that he sends to
Okay,
France to
gotcha.
do it. Yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
this is interesting too. Ruler of the fourth and the ninth, land, but
yeah,
far away, and
right.
Mars, like getting rid
Yeah,
of it.
yeah,
I mean, it
yeah.
seems this. Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's funny that it makes sense. I'm not sure I would have been able to arrive at the Louisiana Purchase through a simple placement like
Sure,
that, but
sure.
um,
And then a month later, yeah, the war breaks out with France again. Saturn stationing on his Mars.
yeah. Um, that's I think really crucial as well because like Britain is kind of like well, France and Britain have long had this ongoing enmity, we might say, through the
Yep.
centuries, and
Uh,
so Britain
dude,
is like
I'm from Montreal. I can tell you, it's
yeah,
never
yeah.
it's,
So Britain is like
still going on.
France's like special enemy.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a classic thing. I mean, my joke is, the thing about the 100 Years' War is they called it the 100 Years' War because it was only supposed to last 100 years. But this is by the time this stuff is going on, it's already like 600 years or whatever, 500 years since the 100 Years' War. It's still going on, and then 250 years later, it still kind of surfaces here and there. Okay. So now we're getting to the 1803 solar return. There we are. All right. So he's turning 34. He's in a Virgo perfection year. So up comes that Mars Neptune.
Mars,
He's back
Mars,
at war.
Mars. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, this is the transit that anticipates his becoming emperor. Not the crowning. The coronation is still another birthday away, but the Senate is going to proclaim him emperor in May of 1804. But shortly before that happens, he has a political enemy, the Duc d'Enghien, kidnapped from a neighbor, like from outside France, somewhere in Germany, has him kidnapped, brought back to France, put on trial, and executed for treachery, for a traitor. Treason is the word I'm looking for.
Right. I would also want to point out that solar return, if you want to take a look at when the closest eclipse happened, it would have been, just like a day or so after.
Yeah, yeah. Let's look at that. Yes, absolutely.
Well, and with Venus in the midheaven as well, that it's kind of interesting that he has such a, it's a very emperor like, king like,
Yeah,
regal kind of eclipse there. So yeah, that just
yeah,
works
yeah.
pretty
No,
well.
thanks for getting me to put that back up. You're absolutely right, and that eclipse I think is crucial. Yeah, he's going to become emperor. And he's also going to create the Légion d'honneur, which we'll get to in a moment. So, but first, let's start with the Duc d'Enghien, because this really hurts Napoleon. A lot of people who are even his allies really bristle at him doing this. And, like even some of his closest aides go from being like loyal Bonaparte guys to being like a little like, this guy isn't altogether what he should be. And then years later, when Napoleon's on St. Helena, he keeps saying that, they wanted him to be Washington. In other words, to sort of, let go of
Relinquish
power.
power.
Yeah, relinquish power, peacefully, and this could have been his time to do it, right? I mean, this is kind of, well, maybe
But
after Austerlitz or something, but
another thing that's really interesting about this is he was age 34 at this point, right?
yeah,
Yeah, so he is in a 11th house year, and
yeah,
like this, so this is highlighting his potential for divisions amongst one's allies.
yeah,
And here we see Mars is even, moving in towards this opposition with his natal Mars,
yeah,
which hasn't been good for him in the past. When it's stationed retrograde there at the, invasion of Egypt. So, I just think it's so interesting the way you even described that. Like he takes this like rash action that
yeah,
even causes his allies to kind of
yeah,
go,
yeah,
man, that's
yeah.
messed up. Like you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to go that hard.
Yeah, yeah,
um
yeah. It really does undermine him, and so this is just before he's named emperor by the Senate. That's in March, and then it's like, the first French Empire is declared with him as the emperor in May of 1804. Just, not quite 2 months after. Well, yeah, 2 months after.
wow.
And so this is him being named, Emperor Napoleon. And from here on, we call him Napoleon. Until now, we would always call him Bonaparte. That's one of the many sort of little flaws in Ridley's movie, is that when he meets Josephine, he says his name is Napoleon, whereas certainly he would have said his name is Bonaparte when he met her.
Right, it's kind
That
of
that would
like
have that would have been the convention. But now that he's like, from here on, he's Napoleon. Until
you
now,
know
we should have been calling him Bonaparte.
before he was this, yeah, so you're saying before he was more like Beyonce Knowles, and
And
after
now
this
he's
he's
Beyonce. Yeah,
Beyonce, or Madonna, Ciccone, now
yeah,
she's
yeah,
Madonna. He's in this rare class of individuals who can get by with just one name.
right.
um
Prince Rogers, you name it. These,
yeah.
yeah,
um so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's really interesting, and look how close the nodes are to like
To the
his
angles, yeah,
to the angle of the MC. I really think there's something to that. It's um uh, we tend to focus at the times of eclipses exclusively, but I think kind of the third point to be considering when looking at eclipse cycles is kind of just where the node is actually
oh yeah, for
moving
sure,
to. It seems
yeah,
to point at things that otherwise wouldn't appear to us just by a cursory examination of the sun and moon positions, but knowing that this is happening sort of in the context of eclipses in the 10th, and that the actual like the eclipsing point is moving towards a sort of crucial degree area of his chart. So yeah, it's really it works very well.
very well. Okay, and then, yeah, just one other transit from this, year for him is, uh, the first induction ceremony for the Légion d'honneur, which is, um, the first award, given on, for merit. It's an award of merit, not strictly military or anything.
And I
So
thought you had an interesting perspective on this, Nick. When we were talking about this earlier, and on a different day, you were saying about how this actually kind of upset the sort of, I guess, the aristocracy at this point.
right,
Right.
yeah, because I mean, this is a really sort of revolutionary. I mean, the revolution is over, but this is something that's done in the spirit of the revolution, where you have something, this title that can be awarded to absolutely anyone, and so that, yeah, the aristocracy are not fond of it.
Well, I guess the modern day equivalent would be like, well, are they going to give out Oscars to people on YouTube now? You know, that's what I would think the kind of modern day equivalent. Like, what they're gonna,
Right.
they're gonna give the Medal of Honor to people who posted the bravest selfie on Instagram now. How
Yeah.
dare the plebes,
Yeah.
encroach upon the sacrosanct? Yeah. Anyway, Um,
Yeah, or UBI things or what have. But no, but this is a real sort of award of merit. So there is
yeah,
something, this is sort of a lasting legacy of, Napoleon showing that he still has some of the revolution in him. Um,
yeah.
and in doing it, like, yeah, he's becoming an emperor, but everyone else has to like earn their title. you know, it's a great sort of
I
uh,
also feel like it's kind of Napoleon's not, Napoleon isn't forgetting where he came from in a sense. Not that I mean, okay, let's check Napoleon's privilege here. He did come from his father did have some degree of like political connections in Corsica that like his classmates in Corsica wouldn't have had. But otherwise, everything else was kind of more up to him. He did have
sure.
to kind of earn his place. Of course, just granting yourself titles and ability is kind of the ultimate height of privilege. But I wouldn't say he like earned becoming emperor or something, but he's certainly up to about the first consul. That was the last thing he really properly earned.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
uh,
mean, let's wait. Even that, like, come on, he
even
marched
that.
into a room and kind of took it. So, like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I
Finders
mean,
keepers. Yeah.
right. It was, it
No
was at the
takesy
tail,
backsies. Yeah.
right. I mean,
Um,
it was a very, destabilized period, and someone
right,
had to
right.
sort of seize the reins, and you can make allowances for that. But yeah, I mean, well, what he did do was he defended France, like especially like the Italian campaign. No one expected the French army to win the Italian campaign. So when he wins that, it's such a, you know, yeah, it's a real flex for the French Revolution because suddenly they show they mean business and like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be invading us. Maybe you should let us have our revolution.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's
Should
the
have
way
gave the
that's the
revolution
way.
some teeth, and
Yeah, yeah,
it. Yeah, I guess the equivalent would almost be like if well, I don't want to. Well, maybe I shouldn't speculate too openly like that because that would be bad. But yeah, I get the point. Um. Anyway,
all right, moving along to the next solar return. Boy, we're getting close
crawling
to
along.
crawling along. Well, I wouldn't say crawling along. We're
No,
we're
no, no.
we're in the last decade of his political life. Like,
Hmm. Right.
we're getting to the point where the yeah, Waterloo is almost 10 years away. It's 10 and a half years away. So
So now,
so now he's turning 35, and again there's that Venus retrograde in the solar return. But he's in a Libra perfection year. Which you will remember he was also in back in 1780, which I
mm,
showed you long ago. Is the other time he had a Venus retrograde in Leo while he's in a Libra perfection year. And yeah, this is um, the last Venus retrograde in Leo 8 years earlier was in the middle of his Italian campaign when he's just married Josephine and she comes to visit him, but she's bored and, she's starting to cheat on him, but he won't believe it until he gets to Egypt. Um, Now this time it's a little easier. He's going to be crowning himself emperor and, starting to make some gains in the new war against Britain.
that's interesting. So in the prior year's solar return shows us that he would be crowning himself emperor, but the actual like ceremony with the one that's in the painting and everything,
Yeah, in the
that's not
movie,
until
that's this
yeah,
day.
that's not until later. So that Venus retrograde on the MC then reflects that this is the year where he does this kind of elaborate display, of
Right.
his regal kingliness,
Right, right.
the extra long cape and
Yes.
the
So he's in the 12th house perfection year, but look at these planets that are in the 12th with the Lord of the Year, retrograde right up on the midheaven. But then by the time he's crowning himself, and remember, he crowns himself, the Pope is there. The
yeah.
Pope is usually the guy who puts the crown on your head. But Napoleon, Leo's gonna Leo, Napoleon has the Pope stand there and watch him put the crown on his own head. And he
Yeah.
says he does apparently say that line like I found this thing in the gutter and put it on my head or something like that. Whatever it is he says in the movie is he did say something to that effect. And you can see in the solar return, it's Jupiter at 29 with Uranus and Saturn. But then by the time he's crowning himself, it's Venus at 29 with
it's still
Saturn.
in a degree-based conjunction to the ascendant, even if the ascendant's
Yeah.
Scorpio. So I
Yeah.
mean, you can
but in this anoretic degree of Libra too, like Libra being Libra. How fabulous does this cloak?
I was gonna say,
how great do I look in this get up?
It's well, Paris is supposed to be like the home of fashion, right?
Yeah,
it's like that reputation actually comes from a lot earlier. Napoleon made us walk down the catwalk.
That's right.
Runway queen, already in 1804.
Interesting that the nodes have now moved into Cancer and Capricorn, and they're straddling that moon Saturn of his as well, I think.
Right.
Squared by the Venus, no less.
That's true. I also look at this Jupiter, not only is this part of his Jupiter return, but also with Jupiter conjoining Neptune, this was like a highly choreographed, propagandistic display, right? This is not like, this is all for glitz. This is all for the show
symbolism and
it's not this isn't actually when he assumed the powers of this position. It's just when
it's just consolidating it in show and everything.
So, I see people reacting to some of the comments we've been making.
Oh, really? What are people saying? I'm not following.
Someone said
Leo's gonna Leo. Okay.
Painting the nails. People reacting to the comments I made about the Oscars on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
well, I'm glad people are enjoying it. We're just proceeding. We're hoping people enjoy what we do. I know it's like a super deep dive, but we wanted to do a super deep dive. So
you can't have it both ways, right? Either you want your astrology simple and sweet and able to be shoved in your mouth, or you're gonna
it's the banquet. It's the banquet.
And this is this is getting all of your macronutrients in astrologically, right?
That's right.
This is your vegetables.
Yeah, and we're making this live stream as long as Ridley's movie should have been. It might be as long as the extended cut when it finally does come to.
You don't have any kind of deadline we should be aware of?
I've got a client in just under 2 hours from now, but
okay. We should be okay. I will probably do the slightly brisker version of Zodiacal releasing when we get around to that, but otherwise we'll keep moving.
We're almost done with this, and that still gives us a full hour to do Zodiacal releases. So I'm not too worried. I don't think we need to rush through anything. I think we're doing well.
Okay. Yeah, we're doing well.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So
television, everyone.
So with that, we're gonna move into quite an interesting year, the year of Trafalgar and the year of Austerlitz, 1805. Austerlitz sounds like the title of a Rammstein song. Austerlitz. You Austerlitz. Okay.
Right.
All German words sound like a title of a rap.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even the word, like the word for gums, like in your mouth, is Zahnfleisch. Teeth. Yeah. It's like, okay,
that's a Rammstein song just waiting to happen. Couchfleisch.
Well, and I love how like you have the word butterfly, and in German it's Schmetterling.
Okay. All right. We're sorry. Anyway, very sorry, Germany. We love your beautiful language. Okay. So here we are. This is his birthday in 1805. So he's turning 36. It's a first house perfection year. So there's that Jupiter Neptune in the first. And what a spectacular year for him, right? I mean, apart from Wellington beating him at Waterloo, the greatest. Well, I'm saying apart from that, the greatest defeat of his life is going to be Trafalgar,
right?
Although he's not actually there, but it's a defeat for him, no question.
Yeah.
But then followed shortly, ironically, the first anniversary of him becoming emperor, of him crowning himself emperor, is the Battle of Austerlitz. You can't plan that kind of thing. It's kind of impressive. But first, okay, so this is Trafalgar, which um, this is where the French fleet is defeated by Nelson. Nelson is killed in the battle, but he basically shuts down all French aspirations to be a naval power.
Yep, I stood on the spot where I got shot. You
Did
can
you?
go. Yep, you can go on you can go on like the reconstructed ship, and there's
Oh,
like a
okay. All
gold
right.
plaque on the floor, and you can stand on it.
And it looks like the is your birthday not your birthday's the 23rd or the
Yeah,
21st?
23rd.
Oh, okay, so it's not
23rd.
the anniversary of your birthday. It's almost
Yeah,
in
it's
that,
almost, almost.
almost
I mean, I
there.
was born like at the very beginning of the 23rd.
Right, right.
So almost,
Okay.
basically the 22nd. But what I think is interesting about this as well, and this is another dimension potentially to Napoleon's Mars Neptune conjunction, because you can see there's a recurrence transit here,
Yeah,
where Mars Neptune is conjunct in Scorpio,
right.
and that is, if we think of Neptune very generally as the ocean, it seems like Napoleon didn't like to do naval battles really.
No.
He preferred land. And so I just think it's interesting that like one of his greatest defeats in a way militarily was like primarily a naval engagement, that occurs in his first house. So I just
Yeah,
thought that was sort of interesting. You would
yeah.
think maybe a Mars Neptune conjunction recurrence with someone might be, good, but in this case, it just seems to sort of amplify the kind of natal tendency,
Yeah.
with
And we've
Mars.
we I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Go ahead. No, 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 go ahead.
No, we've established that the Mars transit through Scorpio is not a transit that he likes. We showed like when he was
Right.
arrested. He was arrested when Mars was in Scorpio, and he went to jail not knowing if he would go to the guillotine. Of course, he started his career at the
His military
military
education
academy
with Mars
when Mars was
retrograde.
retrograde in Scorpio, and that was
Yep.
really hard on him. But yeah, he does not like it when Mars is in Scorpio. And this is another testament to that. And it's always fascinating. Like just like 5 weeks after Trafalgar is when he wins Austerlitz, which is the celebrated battle. I mean, there is a bridge in Paris called Austerlitz. And of course, one of the complaints about Ridley Scott's movie is how few of the battles are depicted in the movie. But sure enough, Austerlitz is, although it's it's fictionalized to some degree. I love the scene of all the, I watched it in the sort of what do you call the theaters that sort of vibrate when there's gun battles and stuff, like a whole
You had a D box? You
I
sat in
had
a D
yeah,
box?
I sat in one of those special chairs and all that in the theater I
Oh,
went to
wow.
see it.
Oh, like, where, like, they, like, it, like, vibrates almost like what
Yeah.
Natal and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Those are cool.
It was that whole experience, and
Oh, wow.
so the Austerlitz scene was fun. All the horses falling through the ice and all that. But they've actually combed the lake where that frozen ice was, and they haven't really found many or any corpses. like he did fire cannon into the ice to block the escape of the of the Austrians and Russians who were at Austerlitz, but this idea that he was smashing the ice as they're riding across it and they're all
Yeah, it's a
falling
bit
into the
Hollywood.
yeah, I mean it's great. It's
It's pretty
cinematically it's very satisfying. Cinematically it's a lot of fun watching that happen. But yeah, it's not how Austerlitz went down. And also the whole idea that he has his army sort of like hidden under a tarp. That's not what at Austerlitz. It was just kind of magical. His army was covered by fog, and then and this would have been great. I mean, it's almost sort of
Oh,
like
that is a bit more Neptune.
exactly.
Actually.
It's more Neptune, and the movie kind of like makes it more deliberate, whereas it really was kind of like movie like in the sense that they were covered by fog, and then the fog lifts right as the army shows itself, and right at the moment when the Austrians and the Russians realize that they're in a pincer movement. They're surrounded on all sides, they can't escape, and yeah, it emerges out of a fog. So yeah, it is very Neptune, and it's a lot more cinematic than Ridley actually did with the movie for some reason.
Huh. And
Yeah,
so at this point, he's 36.
Yes, he's still 36. Yeah,
Still
so
36. So
he's in that first house perfection year.
yeah, so Jupiter is applying that square to, or is in square
To his Mars. Yeah.
to his Mars. So yeah, we can
Yeah.
kind of combine those ideas. Military victory. Um,
Indeed.
yeah, Mars trine the
Indeed.
sun as well. That's
Yeah,
also
and
pretty
this,
good.
yeah, and he's got at the same time Venus opposite his Saturn, squared by transiting Saturn and Uranus. Yeah, he means business. He means business. Okay, so yeah, that's Austerlitz. Any other thoughts on Austerlitz, or should we move on to
No,
the
no, we can.
denouement, because this is the peak. Like, if he had stopped here, he really would be just a legend, and mostly a clean record. I mean, okay, there is the execution of Duc d'Enghien. There is
and
there
the
is
execution of
the massacre at Acre. Uh,
the prisoners. Yeah,
yeah. There's a few shitty things that he's done before this, but
he
if
also
he
did bring back slavery as well. There is that.
right, yeah, he did.
Yeah,
Okay, yes, thank you. Yep, yep. That's one of the unfortunate things that happens. Yeah,
yeah. So
he does it knowing that he's going to go back to war with England and he needs money and blah blah blah. Same reason he
right.
sells Louisiana. He will eventually free the slaves at the very end, but that's to spite the British.
Yeah.
Like
So
just before he's like lost for good, he does free slaves again. But yeah, um, it's not like France's record is sort of spotless after this or anything.
right.
Anyway, um,
Anyway,
moving right along, let's get ourselves to 1806. Um, yeah, I mean, some of these, he signs the Treaty of Pressburg. There's the battle I was talking about in South Africa near Cape Town, the Battle of Blouberg, where the British for a second time take over South Africa. The Kingdom of Holland is created. And so then we get to his birthday in 1806, which is the birthday before the Battle of Jena, when he takes on the Prussians, and then he'll also go after the Russians. So this is a pretty important year, and it anticipates some crucial battles for him as well. So now he's 37. He's in a Sagittarius perfection year. You there?
yeah,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
here. Yeah. I was just looking at the chart.
Okay.
Because this is the year they signed the Treaty of Tilsit, right?
That's right. That's right.
So we see Venus not returning to the degree, but to the same sign. Meanwhile, Mars is on the degree of Venus, and we know that eventually that treaty will be broken. So
Yeah.
it's sort of interesting. It sort of almost reflects like, it's like almost there, like it kind of comes about, this idea
Yeah.
of peace, but on somehow tense grounds. But that's
But he's gonna fight some
well.
brutal battles in order to get
Right.
to Tilsit. One of the Eylau is typically described as like, apart from the nightmare in Russia, one of the absolute worst things. But here, I'll get these going here. So first, there's the Battle of Jena, which is another one of these really. This is against the Prussians and Saxony. Although I think the Saxons become his allies in time. Yeah, so this is Jena Auerstadt. These are two different battles fought on the same day, and it's an absolute triumph for Napoleon again. But really, really tough. Really, really tough. And
So Jupiter's the ruler of the year. Mars making a superior square to Jupiter, but with Jupiter hurling rays back technically.
right.
So we kind of see again like a Mars Jupiter square coinciding with the time of victory.
Right.
Originally back at Austerlitz was Jupiter and Sag squares Mars and Virgo.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
in this situation, it's Mars and Leo squares Jupiter in the first. So it speaks both to the monumental effort and losses it took to get a hard fought victory.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And from there he moves on to the Battle of Eylau against Russia. And this happens in the dead of winter, and this is apparently like just brutal. They talk about this one being one of the most brutal battles of his military career, because it happens in winter, and also I believe that the French and Russian armies just kind of stumble across each other. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh my God, it's the Russians! Start firing! You know, it's not like a
Not
lot of these.
planned.
Yeah, it's a lot of these. Like even Waterloo, right? That the armies sort of assemble on the field, and you know they're camping out the night before, and they know the enemy's like just over there. But in the morning they'll all get up, they'll have their morning coffee, and then they'll line up in formation and start fighting. But this is more of a sort of like, yeah, they bump into each other, and mayhem ensues.
Yeesh. And this is also with Mars retrograde in Virgo, closer towards the retrograde station. So again, this calls to mind the idea of like, Mars acting irregularly, what you describe about the way they're just kind of, in a very kind of hastily planned war, hastily planned battle. We just know like Mars kind of acts more irregularly when it's retrograde, and so
Yeah,
I guess that's how it makes sense in this context.
yeah. And Uranus has just gone into
Scorpio.
Scorpio, into the rising sign. So yeah, things are starting to change, and this is really, Napoleon is starting to go too far. Not quite yet, but he's starting to go too far.
Yeah, I
And
mean, he something important to note is that there's been like certain points where he's gone too far, but like the stakes were sort of lower in some respect, and now he's really kind of towering, at this lofty position that few people have ever kind of reached. And so,
yeah,
the higher you go, the harder the fall
the
is.
harder you fall.
Um,
So then this is Friedland. This is the battle he fights Russia before Tilsit. This is the battle that forces Tilsit. So this is another Pluto station battle, which we've seen before. And this is where he forces, he has a meeting with Alexander. This is another thing they didn't show in the movie. They show him meeting Alexander, but they're not on a raft halfway across the river. The
yeah,
whole
they
idea,
didn't. They
they had
kind
to
of
be they had to be on neutral territory, so they meet on a raft, and they really could have, this could have been an amazing cinematic set piece, but they didn't
instead
even
they got
do
a
that.
tent.
Yeah, there was a tent on the raft, as I've seen it
Oh,
depicted, but yeah, there was a tent on the raft, but they should be on a raft, and it would have,
there was no raft. There was
yeah, it would have looked.
absolutely no raft.
There's no
Yeah.
raft. I believe there was a tent on the raft, and they meet on this raft. The idea being that they're on neutral territory, that
Mm.
one doesn't have to cross the river to meet the other. There's a lot of ego involved there, and so Saturn's still hovering around the ascendant. Uranus has wandered back into Libra, square his Saturn, square his Moon. So we're really touching this axis for him, is really getting a lot of like back and forth here.
And that's interesting too that Venus, again is in the midheaven,
Right.
because this is, another kind of a
Heralded
victory, of
moment. Yeah.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
for him.
This is the actual signing of Tilsit after they've met and talked. So
Yeah.
Saturn is now stationing direct. And yeah,
Dang.
there you go.
That's very kind of straightforward, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah.
Even with a Moon Mercury conjunction on his natal Mercury, I mean, it's the signing of the document.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's the next birthday, 1807, and this is the birthday that anticipates him invading Spain. And this is like, this is crossing. This is definitely something he should not have done. Everything else he's done so far, whether he should have done it or not, he's gotten away with it. But now when he goes into Spain, this is the beginning of him really just, he can't read the room.
This is really kind of the peak of how big the French Empire could really get. Also worth noting is Pluto is now opposite his ascendant ruler, Mars, and so this is kind of like maximum
Yeah.
assertiveness and, danger kind of.
Yeah, well, he's made all these alliances. Like he's made an alliance with Russia that they'll turn against him. He's got something going on with the Austrians because he beat them at Austerlitz, but they're going to turn on him while he's in Spain, and he's going to have to go fight them again, and then he's going to have to go marry the emperor's daughter, and all that. But here we are, leading up to that. This is his birthday in 1807. He's turning 38 years old, right? So he's
Yep. Yeah. So
so
then
so this
Capricorn.
Capricorn perfection year is lighting up. Yeah, the sign that he has Pluto and the moon, and he's going to invade his neighbor and he's going to, as they say, F around and find out, right? Like the kids are saying.
Well, and again, the ruler of the year is that Saturn in the ninth. Again, kind of going too far in a foreign place.
Right. Very much. Very much. So with that in mind, let's just look at him. Transits leading up to that battle. So French troops enter Lisbon. What he's going to do is he's going to put his brother. He's going to dethrone the Spanish king and the heir to the Spanish throne, the father and the son, and he's going to put his own brother Joseph, who's already king of Naples, but he's going to take Joseph from being king of Naples, make him king of Spain, and then he's going to take Joaquin Murat, who's married to his sister, which sister? Caroline, who I think is the youngest. Yeah, she's the youngest of the sisters. They're going to become king and queen of Naples. And eventually they're going to turn against Napoleon, later on. But at this point, and then they're going to come back in his favor, and then Murat will be executed. But they enter Lisbon, and this is ill-fated. So you can see Mars is in the perfected sign. Coming up to that Pluto.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a third house year, so here we have this. I mean, you haven't even really touched on all the sibling stuff, but in the years leading up to this, like 1805 to 1807 or so, isn't he like putting his
siblings on the thrones of Europe?
Yeah, he's like trying to create like a dynasty.
But it's because his mother has made him do it. It's his mother's idea.
Well, yeah, this is the lunar drama. This is, keeping up with the Bonapartes. It's
it really is. It's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And it sets off this whole thing in his family, because his brother Louis is married to Josephine's daughter. What's her name? Hortense de Beauharnais. So Louis and Hortense are married, and they're made king and queen of the Netherlands. But then all of Napoleon's sisters are jealous that his stepdaughter gets to be a queen, but they're not queens. And they literally like they're screaming at him over this, and he's got to deal with why does she get to be a queen and I'm only a
I'm only a duchess.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to be a duchess.
Exactly. But it's like it's apparently they're Corsican, so they're yelling at each other, they're screaming.
Right. Italian, yeah.
Right. No, so like that kind of scene is going on. Saturn's on his Jupiter, so he does kind of he doesn't have his mojo. There's Saturn on your Jupiter is just you do not have your mojo. The things that usually work suddenly aren't working. You usually have this bag of tricks, and the bag of tricks is always consistently worked, and then one day it doesn't, and that's when Saturn's on your Jupiter. In a big way. Yeah. Yeah, and Saturn's the Lord of the year because he's in the Capricorn perfection year. So
that's right.
There we go. Yeah, so that's all happening, and okay, so there's the abdication of Charles IV of Spain, and then he pressures his son.
He seems to like Mars in Aries. I've just been noticing a lot of charts with Mars in Aries where it's kind of so he doesn't like Mars in Scorpio, but Mars in Aries seems to be
Right.
a little more his jam. You know, Mars was in Aries at the beginning of the French Empire, for example.
Right. Well, I
Uh,
mean, the sixth house is very like, military types love the sixth house. It's
well, I was gonna
all
say, wasn't he has like his um he was beloved by the men under him, right? By
yeah,
the soldiers who
yeah,
served under him. They were his
yeah,
his allies, his martial allies.
yeah.
Um, anyway.
And it is where he has fortune.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, this is now he's pressuring he's gotten the king to abdicate. Now he puts the son in place, and then the son happens, and then we get the beginning of what we now call guerrilla warfare. The term guerrilla is coined in this war, being the Spanish word for fighters, I suppose, is a way to put it. People who aren't military, but who are just sort of, fighting. They're out there in the Spanish desert and, ambushing French troops and doing some really unspeakable things to whichever French troops they capture.
That's interesting. Mars, Uranus again.
Right.
Even a
Yeah.
solar eclipse with Mars
Yeah.
about a week before.
Yeah. Yeah. Good eye. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Sun Mars on his Uranus in the seventh, and yeah, this the people he's trying to occupy are revolting against him,
Dang.
and he doesn't have his usual mojo. He's not his usual tricks are not working with the Spanish. He's trying to bring the revolution to Spain in a way, and they're not
Yeah.
having it.
Well, I was going to say this is kind of a reflection of Uranus and Leo and having moved to Scorpio. You know, it's that's interesting the way you put that. That he was trying to bring the revolution came in with Uranus and Leo opposing Pluto and Aquarius, and here we have
Right,
Uranus,
coming into
and coming
Scorpio,
into
and
the
yeah,
next square with that placement, and of course this is also speaking of mojo, I think when Uranus opposes your natal Uranus, that can be that can kind of force you to reinvent yourself, because of stagnation.
right, right.
Um,
But it also, I mean, the Uranus half return is kind of like the anti Saturn return. You know what I mean? Like it's the Saturn return when you're turning 29 is all about like growing up and becoming an adult and the passing of time. But that Uranus half return when you're in your early 40s is more sort of like, wait a minute, who was I when I was an adolescent, when I was idealistic? Who did I
when I was
see
a
myself as?
revolutionary,
Yeah,
when I inspired by the French Revolution, you know,
well, he think his Uranian fantasy is that he's Alexander the Great. He's Charlemagne. You were talking about the EU and uniting Europe. I mean, that's another person that he models himself after, is
Mm,
Charlemagne,
right,
who had for a stretch united Europe 1,000 years or
right,
whatever
that's
ago,
true.
less than 1,000, but a long time before. Um, so that's his Uranus sort of fantasy about himself is that's who he is. He's Charlemagne, he's Alexander, he's this great sort of uniter as well as a conqueror. He's got this.
Uranus Fantasy by Nick Dagan Best. it's
It's my new scent.
in a
Uh,
yeah. Oh,
Smells like
no.
Uranus. Yeah,
That's the
we're
point.
making those jokes
All
here.
right. Okay.
Okay, all right. So you wanted it. I gave it to you,
Yeah,
Watson. You asked for
rightly
that.
Uranus. Yeah.
You asked for that. But here,
Okay.
okay, now this is interesting. He's still in his Capricorn perfection year,
Mhm.
and Saturn is stationing direct on his
On this
Jupiter,
Jupiter.
while Uranus is on his ascendant. And this is another event that he's not there for it, but it's a huge event in his life. The Battle of Belin. I'm sorry, the font I use here doesn't use accents very well, and this should be an E with an accent, which you find accent aigu like we find in French and Spanish. But
Right.
this is the Battle of Belin, and it's the French army is just totally defeated, and Joseph, who's the king, has to evacuate, and I think he leaves Spain altogether. But it's a huge humiliation, and Napoleon, while he's not there, it prompts him. He's like, okay, now I got to go into Spain and straighten things out, which is kind of a big distraction for him, and it doesn't go very well.
It wasn't just when Saturn stationed, but it was also when the sun was conjunct his natal Saturn.
Right? Yeah. Good point. Yeah. So yeah, it's super duper 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 Saturn. And I think this is kind of, I mean, this is where he realizes Spain is not going to be easy. I mean, there was the Madrid uprising and all that stuff, but he thinks he's faced hostile populists before. He's the guy who gives them a whiff of grape shot.
He's a guy who just slaughters
Yeah,
them.
right. But it doesn't work. His mojo
Right.
is not working. Same old deal. It just doesn't happen. Okay, fascinating. So that's Belin, and now we're gonna move into his next birthday, his 1808 birthday. All right, here we are. So it's a Sun-Venus exterior conjunction, which must mean he's in an air sign perfection year, which he is. He's in an Aquarius perfection year. Saturn is still on his Jupiter.
So yeah, mojo is still suppressed. Although Mars is applying towards his
Saturn, yeah.
So
And he does go in and sort of, kick some ass, so to speak, and get things moving. But by the time that happens, the Austrians are now and the Russians are starting to show their teeth, and now he's got them to contend with while he's still trying to subdue Spain. So let's see. Yeah. After Belin, he has a second meeting with Alexander in Erfurt. And he brings Talleyrand with him. Talleyrand is his foreign minister.
Yeah.
And while in meetings, I think this is kind of hinted at in the movie. If they sort of show this is Talleyrand is Napoleon's foreign minister. But he's not loyal to Napoleon. He's loyal to France. And so he thinks Napoleon's a problem. And so he tells Alexander how to negotiate. He's sort of behind Napoleon's back, meets with Alexander and coaches him how to get more out of Napoleon in negotiations, and sort of, so he's playing both sides here and sort of deliberately being a double agent. Talleyrand's a fascinating character in his own right. I could just go on and on about him. But suffice to say, it doesn't really help Napoleon when, you're bringing along someone who ostensibly works for you, and even they're sort of working against you.
This is sort of like Blinken, Anthony Blinken, like going,
yes,
sort of
yeah.
scenes to, yeah.
Yeah. If Blinken was going up to Xi Jinping and saying, "Listen, you don't know how to negotiate with Joe. Let me tell you how to handle Joe Biden."
Right.
It would be something like that. Exactly. So yeah, Mars is square Saturn. Saturn is still the Lord here, and Alexander already he's playing along with Napoleon, but he knows at this point that he's going to turn against him.
Right.
And
so even though they have this treaty in place, Russia basically keeps violating the terms, and it just becomes clear that it's not going to hold.
Right. And then amidst all this, while he's still in Spain, he finds out that Austria is challenging him again. So then he gets troops together and he goes to Austria. He can get there in record time. And there's this battle at Aspern-Essling, followed by another one of the really sort of highly vaunted Napoleonic battles is Wagram, where he beats the Austrians yet again. But he doesn't just beat them. He's at this point, as you see in the movie, he's discovered that Josephine, he's had some illegitimate kids by this point. He's had a few affairs and bore children. And so he knows that he's not the one who can't bear children. It's Josephine. So he's going to be divorcing Josephine by I think early next year, and then marries the Emperor of Austria's daughter.
So this is another dimension potentially of that Pluto in the 5th house transit. Is he's just kind of obsessed about making an
Right.
heir, having an heir, having a
Great
child.
point. Yeah.
And that's interesting as well, because we know that there would have been a series of eclipses that would have occurred in the 7th house in
Right.
the year and a half leading up to this as well. I don't know. Obviously,
Let's
I
see
don't
where
know
they
exactly
were.
when the
See where they were. In April of 1809. Yeah, one of them was at 9 Scorpio.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, I guess we would have had to go back earlier for ones that happened in Taurus and Scorpio. In any case,
Yeah, I mean, I could put up an earlier chart.
oh yeah, no worries.
Okay.
So
yeah, Wagram is whoops, another one of these. There we are. Yeah, sure enough, and you can see this. The Saturn is actually going to station direct soon enough and get itself out of Scorpio finally. But it's no longer on his Jupiter, so he can win battles. Well, I've just gone and done that again. Silly me. Yeah, 26 days before the direct station, so it's at the tail end of that whole thing. All right, cool. Let's go to the next one. We're almost in Russia now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are we gonna look at like the marriage and the
yeah,
birth and stuff? Are we gonna? Or I mean, I'm happy to continue on with the wars, but no, since you brought up some of those other like personal events.
Yeah. Let's do it. So this is the next solar return after Wagram.
So at this point, he's 30.
He's 40. He's
40.
turning 40. Yeah.
So highlighting the 5th house.
Synodic Venus return, Synodic Mercury return.
So yeah, this is a 5th house perfection year. That's going to be highlighting the 5th house of children, and that's right. Like the entire reason this is really happening, right. Is just so that he can have a child.
Yeah. And the exaltation ruler is again making a return. So it's not like, remember 8 years earlier, this was a perfection in Cancer, and he was, making peace with a foreign power. But now he's marrying a woman who's like, who was literally born during the French Revolution. she's like 18 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And he's, yeah, exactly. Well, he wants a fertile a woman of royal lineage to have babies with. And so, younger women are fertile, and that's what he wants.
Yeah. In the movie, they made it very, they made it a pretty kind of emotional thing, that like when he he divorces Josephine, even though he
doesn't want to,
and that it's kind of done for like the political reasons, not for
exactly
personal ones. He really would have wanted to have children with Josephine, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right.
This is true. This is true. Yeah.
So the ruler of the 7th came back to itself in the year that he does get married to this other person that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the purpose of having kids. And she is, she is a younger woman too. So it's the
Venus.
Yeah. So there's all that Venus stuff there. Okay. And from that, I'll just show the chart of the wedding to Mary Louise.
So the ruler of the year is Jupiter, and Jupiter entered the 7th house. So again, this is a Scorpio rising chart. Napoleon had to have been
Scorpio rising
after 11, before 11:30.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. And it's interesting that Mars and Jupiter are there. Mary Louise herself is, even though like she's kind of forced to marry him, she's apparently like really okay with it. They get along great. Eventually she'll bear him a son, but eventually as his political fortunes fail, she's got a lot of people around her. Of course she's, her dad is literally Napoleon's enemy. So she's got a lot of people around her who are urging her to, take the kid and split, which eventually she does. uh, she couldn't possibly love him enough to withstand like all the different people telling her, get out of
Yeah.
here, leave,
It
leave.
looks
So
like this is the same Venus interval as, the Treaty of Amiens.
yeah, it is. It's 8 years after Amiens. Yeah.
Um, I mean, apropos of nothing, I guess. But
No, but
but
fair
I just
point.
no, but I'm because I'm just, since, like, this is actually the first time I've looked at it like this sequentially, and so I'm just sort of noticing things here and there
Yeah,
as you're talking me through it. It's amazing.
yeah, yeah. It truly is. All right. And so with that in mind, um, 1810. Let's jump ahead to like the next year. There isn't too much, but let's jump ahead to the 1811 birthday. Um, so that we can get to
Yeah.
the nitty gritty. So that's his birthday in 1811. Sorry, he's going to turn 42. There we are. And so he's in a Taurus perfection year. Lord of the year is up at the midheaven.
Wow. So it's another razzle dazzle 'em. Um,
Uranus on his Jupiter. Yeah, well, I mean, this is, by the time he's going to spend his next birthday in, on his way to Moscow. Uh, um, so this is the beginning of the end, if you will. Um, Aside from that, in leading up to this, it's just sort of dealing with the betrayal. Oh yeah, I've been meaning to speak about some of his secondary progressions. It's during this time that there are some really interesting ones. Damn, I meant to sort of include them as we talked, but I didn't have them conveniently set up. But let me just show you in 1812, leading up to when he progress Venus is coming up to his sun just before he does this, and this is often, not the progression that you would expect. Venus coming to the sun in secondary progressions is not necessarily the cakewalk that we expect. Anyway, so yeah, that birthday is sort of anticipates him uh, um, going into Russia, but a few things are happening in Spain. Uh, um, the siege of Badajoz. Again, these are not events in his life, but they're happening to him. Spain's really coming apart. This is when Wellington is really starting to become a thorn in Napoleon's side. I've actually been to this town when I was traveling Portugal with my family. We 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 went and had like a snack. We crossed the border into Spain and had a snack in Badajoz or Badajoz. Um, yeah, so this is happening, and at the same time, so he's really kind of losing Spain for good, and that's going to lead to them being kicked out. And at the same time, shortly before his 43rd birthday, he crosses the Niemen River into the Russian territory and to his imminent doom. This is a Venus that's about to go retrograde, so you know where we're going with this next solar return.
right.
I've been hinting at this throughout the conversation. There we go. So yet again, Venus retrograde in Leo, and now he's in a Gemini perfection year. Jupiter's on his Saturn. he's feeling optimistic, and I mean,
Yeah.
technically, he's gonna achieve his aims, right? I mean, it's not gonna, it's not gonna play out the way he thinks.
Right.
The battle of Borodino, he technically kind of wins, even though it's a slaughter on both sides. And then he successfully, enters Moscow, but it doesn't play out as he expects.
He goes far, and I kind of see this as the, kind of Saturn beginning to make its way to the opposition. We know
Yes.
that at the Saturn return, that was literally almost to the exact day, like the Cairo revolt,
Yeah.
the beginning of realizing, okay, this is probably not going to work. And so now that Saturn's coming around to the opposite place, we can see that there'll be another kind of creeping realization of
Yeah.
I've gone too far, and I can't back out now.
That's right. So
But I will have to.
from here, let's just get these in there.
I mean, gotta say, Alexander played it well.
Yeah.
Just decided not to dialogue, no negotiation, no engagement, and just basically outlost them.
Well,
And make them freeze.
I'm just going to make a quick diversion to Alexander, because I do want to show this. I know I said this to you in a conversation, but just quickly to go to Alexander and his place with Moscow. Back when Moscow was like just a wooden city, in the 1200s, when the Mongols would attack, what the Muscovites did then was just sort of set fire to Moscow and go running off and burn the crops and in other words, what Alexander does in Moscow is something that Muscovites have been doing to fight off invaders for a long, long time. But it always impresses me. Alexander had the sun at 1 degree Capricorn. And when Napoleon comes into Moscow and the city is set fire, it's when Saturn is conjunct Alexander's sun in the 12th house. And I mean, what a way to sort of like live that transit.
Yeah.
Just
a living embodiment of nope.
yeah.
Just not gonna talk, not gonna negotiate, not gonna do anything.
You want Moscow? Here, have Moscow.
Yeah, yeah.
Have Moscow with my love. Yes. It's brilliant. And what's really interesting, so Saturn is conjunct Alexander's sun when he burns down Moscow. When this Uranus comes to the sun in the early 1820s, that's going to be during the Greek Revolution against the Ottomans. And they want Alexander to come in on their side, as fellow Orthodox Christians and help liberate Greece. But by that point, Alexander, who used to be like an enlightened, he was raised by his grandmother, Catherine the Great, and raised to believe Enlightenment ideals, to be an enlightened despot, if you will. But just like his grandmother, he's gone sour on revolution. He wants nothing to do with it. So when Uranus comes to his sun, and it's this perfect moment when he could have fulfilled this long-standing Russian dream of rescuing Greece from the Ottomans and maybe taking back Constantinople, and the whole sort of Orthodox Christian dream, and he decides not to. So there's a really interesting sort of sequence of Saturn Uranus in his life. But anyway, let's go back to Napoleon.
Yeah. Wow.
So this is Napoleon. His solar return just before, his solar return is Venus retrograde again. But then by the time of Borodino, it is just station direct with the Jupiter. And I mean, this is the thing, is technically he wins this battle, but of course he's just heading to his doom. It doesn't mean anything. And then, after that, he finds out that there's a coup against him. Whoops. He learned, there's a coup against him while he's in Russia, and he feels compelled. It's kind of like Egypt all over again, right? And I know we'll get to that again when we look at.
Also, again, Mars in the 11th. That does seem kind of mutinous.
Yeah.
From the people who are supposed to be under you, but he still prevails, with Jupiter, in the midheaven.
Yeah. But by this point, he's, he himself is making his way back west with his troops, and it's snowing, and there are Cossacks coming along and chopping them down. And, this battle, there's a series of battles, and it culminates with Maloyaroslavets. And
that's a word.
Yeah. That's the son of
Maloyaroslavets on my sandwich, please. Yeah.
The spicy kind, or the kind
with Chipotle.
Chipotle Maloyaroslavets. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, he's he's got to get the hell out.
Yeah.
Famously, he goes into Russia with I think like 175,000 troops, and he comes out with like 25,000 or something like that. Or it's a lot. Most of them
It's
die.
kind of an Elon Musk like, scale of failure, except it's lives rather than,
Yeah,
dollars and
it's yeah. Well,
the value of
let's be fair to Elon. He hasn't yet gotten hundreds of thousands of people killed
yeah,
yet.
give him a chance.
Yet, yeah. He that
Give
that
the
has
boy a chance. Um, yeah.
uh,
Wow. That's a lot.
okay. So yeah, this all happens, and yeah, Lutzen, which he does, then he kind of gets his wings with Lutzen again, and it gives him some confidence and thinks he can win. And the alliance against him, that they're bickering amongst themselves, so it doesn't really help their cause. And in the meantime, he really is finally like finally losing Spain for good with Vittoria right around the same time as well.
Oh,
At another Pluto station. We know how those Pluto stations treat him.
right.
All right. Okay, so now we're getting to the climax. Let's see where we here.
Well, yeah, no one can accuse you of skimping on the foreplay, Nick. 3 hours later. um,
Watson, not that it's any of your business, but no one ever has. No one ever has. Okay, so this is his next birthday. 1813. Yeah, just a couple more to go, and then we'll get to Zodiacal releasing. So here he is. He's turning 44, which is the Cancer perfection year. And now Saturn is on his Pluto opposing it, but nothing is there.
And Saturn on Pluto directly there too.
Yeah.
And it looks like Mars will be making this retrograde passage probably over his moon, the ruler of the year, just a few weeks.
Yeah, and this is actually this Mars retrograde going from Aquarius to Capricorn, because it's going to coincide with what they call the Battle of Nations, and this is really this has this big. It's the Battle of Leipzig, also called the Battle of Nations, and this is a huge battle.
Huge.
It really is. It really is. It really, really is. By this point, the Mars is just coming out of the retrograde. But it's funny, this is where the coalition really sort of coalesces. And even though Napoleon does well here, he knows it's like the beginning of the end. And he doesn't have anywhere else to go, and he's going to be compelled to negotiate and abdicate within a few months. But what's interesting to me is this Mars retrograde going from Aquarius to Capricorn. This is always huge in Russian history when it comes to them making treaties and things like that. Right at the same time, they're making a special treaty with Persia at the same time that they're fighting against Napoleon here. And then later on in the 19th and 20th and even 21st centuries, like for instance, in 2018, when Mars was retrograde in Aquarius, and that's, soccer ball with Donald Trump and all that stuff. I can do a whole talk on that, but it's interesting how the Battle of Nations sort of plays into this longer cycle that we see, when Russia and France have an alliance in 1892 against, Germany. That's during a Mars retrograde in Aquarius. When the Molotov Ribbentrop Pact is signed between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany in 1939. That's a Mars retrograde going from Aquarius to Capricorn. Détente, when Willy Brandt, the president of West Germany, meets up with Leonid Brezhnev in 1971 during the Mars retrograde in Aquarius. These big sort of Russian, peace treaties or alliances or anything like that always occur with this very rare, as you know, very rare Mars retrograde that only occurs 2 or 3 times a century. So the fact that Russian history follows it so closely is really, really interesting. All right, so this is the beginning of the end. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, no. I'm just in awe of your encyclopedic knowledge, as always. Go ahead.
I do find it interesting when someone's in a Cancer perfection year to look at times when the moon's in Cancer.
Right.
I've often found actually full moons in Cancer. Like when I see someone's in a Cancer perfection year, I always ask like, "How's your Christmas? How's your New Year?" Because
Right.
if the full moon follows around, then it can be a really signature day in their year.
Oh, no, for sure. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I've seen that with clients sort of over and over again.
yeah, yeah. It's really kind of amazing. It's like, wow,
The house topic really changes what it's about, but
yeah,
those the new moons in Cancer and the full moons in Cancer really can
right,
be like huge. And if
right.
it's a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse in Cancer, then it's like even more impressive. Um,
Exactly. Okay, so with all this in mind, so by the time um, while he's still in this birthday year, he abdicates. Look at where the nodes are now. We've seen this before,
yeah,
and this is him abdicating the first time. Yes, I'll just go away to Elba and I'll be the emperor of Elba, and I can keep this and I can keep that, and this is just sort of an amicable, like you've gone too far, son. It's not what'll happen the next time he
yeah. This is
abdicates.
like a slap on the wrist. This is just like uh, y- um, more or less uh, like post 2008 crash. What happened to the people responsible for it? Well, nothing.
Yeah.
Basically, in fact, he probably experienced more of a consequence than they did. So yeah, it's not that huge of a deal really
No,
for him.
well, but he does.
But
He gets sent off to Elba,
well, and
and
check out where Saturn is on that date. That date we were just looking at. You know,
yeah,
and Aquarius. So it's the last time it was there, he
was when
was
his father died.
yeah, it was when his father died. But here we see a different type of experience with the fourth house, where he's going to be trapped or you know contained, in this particular place.
Yeah,
So it makes sense. Yeah,
yeah,
how change of residence.
that's right. Yeah, but we did see his last time that happened was when his father died. Do I have that
Yeah,
handy?
yeah. We looked at that before. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to
It
see if
was
I
like
have.
the solar eclipse in his
There
fourth
it is.
house and Saturn in the fourth with Pluto, and yeah, it was
I'll just put the two
pretty
of them up
intense.
together. Yeah. Father dying, Fontainebleau. There they are. They're 29 years apart, and there's the Saturn return there. Okay, so he abdicates. He goes away um, um, to Elba, and then let's look at his birthday here. This is the Waterloo birthday, so he's on Elba. Um, I have the solar return set for Porto Ferreo, so it's the only town
How
I
old
know
is
in
he at this
Elba.
point?
He is turning 45.
5. So this is his
Leo.
10th house year.
Yeah.
With Sun conjunct
Sun
Mars,
Mars again.
he's not going to sit around.
No.
He's not going to sit around doing nothing on this island. Like
Yeah.
he's got to do something.
He's bored.
Um,
He's already he does a lot in Elba when he's there, like he organizes the whole place. He does all his stuff. It's really funny. It's amazing. Like it's not like he just sits around there. It's really it's kind of amazing. But
but
also
we
look,
also, yeah.
yeah. So Saturn half return, nodes down here. The Mars in Leo squaring Uranus. Yeah, he's not going to sit still. Jupiter on his natal Mars. And yeah, with Mercury retrograde, gee, do you think he's going to try and do that all over again? The whole like conquering Europe thing? Yes, he will. Yes, he will. Okay, I already have that open. So then, no, where's Waterloo? Let's do the 100 days rather. Where is it? Oh, because I'm looking at Russia. I went up. I'm like, why? I'm like, how can I not have Waterloo in a? Okay, sorry about that. Here
No,
we are.
you're fine. I should have noticed that
Okay,
earlier.
yeah, yeah. All right, so here we are. I've already looked at that. So, yeah, he escapes from Elba. All right. So yeah, like we said, he's in the Leo perfection year still, and he escapes. Saturn's down here on the IC. Mars moving through Capricorn opposite his Venus.
So he really doesn't want to stay there. He's
Yeah, Jupiter
Saturn's
square.
really cramping his style there in the fourth.
Jupiter square the Mars. We've seen how like Jupiter Mars stuff sort of lights a
Yeah.
fire under his ass.
Well, I don't actually know the story, but I think isn't like the story of his escape kind of more dramatic than what they showed in the movie. Like it's
Yeah,
kind of a little more ingenious, I guess.
yeah, yeah, and it it really is like it, yeah, I mean, it is sort of more cinematic. It's another instance where I think like the real thing was more
Yeah, the
cinematic
real
than what
thing
was
is
given in the
actually more
movie. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Um, because yeah, he does, he escapes from Elba, he lands in France, and even the soldiers sent off to sort of, stop him, wind up signing on with him. Um, and he's, yeah, it's the famous 100 days, and he winds up at Waterloo. And these are the transits for Waterloo.
So something important to point out about this as well is, given that he's in a Leo perfection year, we know that is going to highlight the eclipses, and we can see from where the nodes are that the eclipses are happening across the third and ninth axis, which is important because there was like a solar eclipse that would have happened in the third, or a lunar eclipse that would have happened in the ninth prior to his leaving Elba. And so now we can see there's going to be this second series of eclipses that occur during the Waterloo battle.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
just after, by the time he's caught, certainly. Yeah.
yeah, so the Waterloo battle, we can see this is like right before a full moon in his second, and then a solar eclipse in his ninth. So I just think it's interesting that, well, one, the sun is the general ruler of the 10th house, would reflect something about his own sort of status or something. And so the sun being eclipsed is kind of more of an ominous
Mhm.
sort of development to happen
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
in that context.
Yeah. And we've got Mars Pluto here, and Mars is coming very close to opposing Jupiter yet again. Whenever those two bodies are tangled, it seems.
I think there was a Mars Jupiter at the draw, at the
The draw.
at the battle where it was like a ceasefire basically, because they couldn't, there wasn't a clear winner.
Oh, I'm not sure which one we're talking about.
That was it was about 12 years earlier, I think.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Let's not go back 12 years. We made it.
No,
We made it to
sure.
Waterloo. Oh my God, we
Yeah,
made it
yeah.
to Waterloo. I wonder if people are still watching this. Like,
I think so. Yeah, people are still
right.
talking,
Okay,
asking
cool.
how you operate so far on an Apple PC. Some Cosmic Rose seems to be enjoying it.
All right, cool.
So yeah, we'll continue.
Yeah, I run Parallels Desktop. That's the quick answer, and they give really excellent customer support. So yeah, I've been running Solar Fire on a Mac for nearly 20 years, like 18 years I've been doing it. So it works. It's good. All right. So that's Waterloo, and Napoleon gets sent off to exile. After which, I mean, sorry?
Yeah, we have a chart of his surrender, right?
Yeah, we have the chart of his surrender. He has a progressed new moon, conjunct Mars at 11 Libra, right in this point in 1815 rather. So let's go to July 15th, 1815. But I want to put it up on a tri-wheel. Which was it? July. Whoops.
July 15th.
I just had it. What was it? July 15th. Yes. Sorry. I should have listened to you.
July 15th, 1815.
Okay. July 15th. That's why I got confused. I was like, can it really be 2 15s? 1815, not 2015. 1815.
Okay. Two. All right.
Yeah. So there's been a new moon recently with Mars. in these last few months. Like he's beginning a new life. His whole military thing began after a progressed new moon in the 11th house, and now it's a progressed new moon in the 12th house, and he's heading into exile. He's gonna his life is gonna be all 12th house now, right?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And we know Saturn's moving retrograde back over that same degree where it was when he left. So it's like Saturn's sort of like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Stay put.
Exactly.
Stay right there.
Yeah. So he's going to spend the next, I think, 5 months on a ship and then eventually land at St. Helena. He'll be there until 1821 when he dies, either from stomach cancer or possibly by poisoning.
I figured the stomach cancer actually could make some amount of sense because the ruler of his 6th house is Mars, and
right.
Mars in Virgo, the
And
part of the body corresponding to Virgo is supposed to be the stomach, right? The intestines.
And his father died of stomach cancer. So at least one of his other brothers will die of stomach cancer. Like it runs in the family, it's.
I mean, yeah, that, and also like there was like terrible like chemicals and everything they ate, right? Everyone's just eating mercury. It seems like in this time frame.
I've jumped ahead to his death. I didn't think, we could get into his exile years, but it's not terribly interesting. It's mostly him reflecting on the past. There is some interesting stuff if you're really sort of like deep into it, but this is these are his transits when he dies. And it's at this same time Uranus is on Alexander's sun. You remember I showed you the Saturn, and this is right as that whole Greek revolution is starting to happen, right when Napoleon dies. Lord Byron goes off and winds up dying in that, and so on and so forth. So the revolution continues even with Napoleon gone.
Wow. And at this point he's 51.
Yep. Yeah,
so he's 51. So he's in a
Aquarius perfection.
Perfection. Yeah, and the fourth, can have this connection with like the end of things and the end of life.
Mm-hmm.
The ruler there is Saturn in the 6th house, so he's dealing with illness, and it's making
along with Jupiter, along with Mars.
And it's making that square to his natal Saturn.
Yeah,
and not to mention to his moon as well. So it kind of, if he. If he'd lived in modern times, he might have survived this potentially. Seems like this might have been treatable, but in his situation, it seems like this was like enough, to kind of be the end.
Indeed.
But I want you to show us one more chart against Napoleon's that I think really, if nothing else, proves that he must be Scorpio rising. Throw up the chart of Joaquin Phoenix against Napoleon. Joaquin Phoenix was born October 28th, 1974. We don't have a time, but you don't need it.
No, I know. I wrote a Star IQ article.
Oh, you did? Okay.
About Joaquin's chart, like in the year 2001. Is when I wrote the article. His latest movie was Quills. He had Gladiator.
I love that movie.
Yeah, so do I. And it's about, actually, ironically enough, France. The Marquis de Sade. It takes place during a period while Napoleon is active, and
so Joaquin Phoenix might not have been necessarily the natural choice, according to I don't know, some people, but astrology seems to indicate that he really was the perfect choice for this, because you can see that
there's a lot going on here. Mars right at 0 Scorpio, the Saturn in Cancer, the fact that like this Jupiter Neptune, the way it configures to Napoleon's Neptune, the nodes are close to the same place. No, there's a lot here. Some of the critique I've heard about Joaquin being in the movie is that he basically is playing Napoleon as the Joker, which I thought was hilarious. And I get where people are coming from. The thing about Napoleon is like I'll go along with the critics of Joaquin's performance insofar as it renders it kind of one-dimensional. Like Napoleon wasn't just a weirdo; he was also charismatic and really, adept, as a military leader. He had charisma.
I was going to say he kind of plays him autistic, kind of.
Right.
I don't mean in any kind of pejorative way.
No.
He does it very deliberately.
Yeah.
But uh, but yeah, it does seem like he kind of goes for that with like every choice.
Right, right.
um,
Yeah, whereas I think, Napoleon would deserve like a more nuanced performance. It's one aspect. The thing that Joaquin is showing us about Napoleon, I don't think is untrue, but it's like wildly biased in one sort of aspect of his persona.
mhm. The fact that he was born with Saturn in Cancer, along, with Napoleon, is so interesting because you see that a lot actually with actors and the
Right. Oh
uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. The literally speaking of articles I wrote about Star IQ, the very first article I wrote about Star IQ was about Salma Hayek playing Frida Kahlo.
yes,
And the movie hadn't even been made yet. It was just like when it was announced that Julie Taymor was going to direct it, so it was going to be a movie.
yeah,
And I wrote about how Salma Hayek and Frida Kahlo both had Saturn in Pisces. It was literally my first paying gig as an astrologer, was writing that article.
wow,
So yeah, you do. It's not uncommon when you see an actor and the persona that they perform that you get Saturn in the same sign.
yeah.
There's an anchor there, that
Yeah, there's something to that. So it is, yeah, I just thought that was so interesting that, yeah, Napoleon has his son. I mean, Joaquin has his sun at 5 and Venus at 2 and Mars at 0 degrees Scorpio, and he just is, and that is so close to this
yeah,
range of the ascendant that we've been kind of looking at, 11 to 11:30, that it just
yeah.
it's just too irresistible not to take into account. Anyway, that was just,
Uh,
I thought that might be a
yeah,
fun little
no, that was
tangent.
definitely worth it. Shall I turn the screen over to you now to talk about
Are
his
we
zodiacal
are
releasing?
we do we, it's okay if we don't have time for this.
I
I
think we
would
have time. I
Okay,
think
I
I think
will
we have to. I don't.
okay, well, I will try my best to not get too in the weeds because it's very difficult to be concise with this, but I will do my best. So first of all, I have to remember how to do slideshows with PowerPoint. Okay, from the beginning. Um, Screen. Let me.
Is it not working?
I just have to figure out the right sharing option. Okay, tell me if you see this.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Then I picked the right option. So, as you know, as you may know, so Zodiacal releasing is this technique by which you can divide up someone's life into various chapters, and the sequence is always the same, depending on which sign you start from. All of these periods have a fixed quality or fixed number associated with them. So Aries is 15, Taurus is 8, Gemini is 20, Cancer is 25, Leo is 19, and those all relate to the planetary periods of the planets ruling those signs. So the way you can use this technique in a given natal chart is by looking at the lots, primarily the lots of fortune and the lots of spirit, which I have indicated here with that little fire symbol. And what you do is, if you want to basically paint a picture of someone's overall life activities and the kind of ups and downs that they go through, you would want to start from the sign that the lot of spirit is in, and the signs which are angular to where the lot of fortune is are going to represent the peak periods or the angular periods, the most active or important periods of one's works and life. So the way you can use this is to look at the sign that spirit is in, and you would begin releasing from that sign. That's why it's called Zodiacal releasing. Now, I realize this is probably a really butchered explanation, and I hope that you already have some idea of what this technique is. Otherwise, that probably wasn't a very good idea. But basically, this is the reason we were able to know that the lot of spirit would have to be in Taurus rather than Gemini, because when you generate sequences starting from Gemini, they didn't quite make sense. whereas things really started matching up when you consider Spirit to be in Taurus. So so he has a lot of Spirit in Taurus, which would mean that the first 8 years of his life, from August 15th, 1769 to July 4th, 1777, would be characterized by the planets in the sign, by the ruler of the sign, and by planets making aspects into the sign. And then after that 8 year period is over, the lot releases to the next sign, which would be Gemini. And that would be interpreted according to the placement of its ruler and the planets that are making aspects to that sign, and so on and so forth. So the signs which I've highlighted in blue here are the peak periods. Those are the ones which are angular to fortune. Each one of these signs is going to have different narratives associated with it. So I kind of gave a very brief sort of epithet for each sign to kind of describe its overall sort of quality. In some cases, these periods are more mixed because like a benefic and a malefic are involved with them. And in other cases, some of them are more just distinctly fortunate. And other ones are tricky because they will have things happen in the sub periods that can sort of influence the direction of the way they turn out overall. But in any case, um, when you apply this analysis to his chart, it does do a really good job of kind of dividing his life up into these distinct chapters. The first 8 years of his life essentially coincides with his childhood in Corsica, and we already talked about how the Pluto ingress into Aquarius at age 9, really divides his life from his childhood in Corsica to his teenage years and young adulthood in France. And so it's quite appropriate then that his lot of spirit releases to a new sign roughly at that age, around age 8. And then it is right around the time that he enters his so-called angular or peak period in 1797 that this is really after this is really when he's entering his new like political era, when Pluto ingresses into Pisces, and then he dies in this period. But I'm going to show you kind of why we know that this is really the order that should make the most sense. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but basically, before I get into some of the specifics of the signs, I just would want to pay brief attention to interpreting his lot of spirit itself, which is supposed to give us something fundamental about his modus operandi. And so because he has a lot of spirit of Taurus in the 7th house, ruled by Venus in the 9th, it would tell us that something fundamental about his life is that maybe his life's work would be found in foreign places, which is true on a very basic level. He was not born in the place that he eventually became most associated with. He went from Corsica to France, becoming this French icon. And then we've also talked about Venus in the 9th house in terms of his reforms of the legal systems of Europe and in France. And we even have this quote from him: "I wish to found a European system, a European code of laws, a European judiciary. There would be but one people in Europe." And of course, Venus is opposed to Pluto, so that kind of colors these Venusian aims with kind of the brutal means by which he tried to do these things, through being a dictator, colonizer, enslaver, etc. So that kind of bleeds into our interpretation of those first 8 years of his life, that his activities would mainly revolve around living on this beautiful tropical island and being involved in his religious studies. His mother was extremely religious. At the same time, though, we also know that the major planets which are testifying to the sign are mainly positive. Jupiter by opposition, the Sun and Mercury by square, and Uranus being present in the sign. And his nickname that he developed as a kid was Nebulio, meaning the little meddler. And he was known to be very strong-willed and brash and clever and tricky. And he even said himself, "In my infancy, I was extremely headstrong. Nothing overawed me. Nothing disconcerted me. I was quarrelsome, mischievous. I was afraid of nobody." And that kind of speaks to the sort of Uranian and maybe Mercurial streak of independence. And he came from a fairly privileged family, in that his father did have these sort of connections. So we can kind of see like Venus describing this first part of life in some ways did describe sort of a more, in some ways, idyllic childhood, and did sort of foreshadow some of his qualities later on. So this is sort of when we get to the Gemini period. If we want to interpret this, we can see that the ruler of that period would be Mercury. So we would know that a major um, subject that he would be undertaking this time is learning. And while that is kind of general to say, because most people are doing a lot of learning in their teens, we know that, with Mercury in the 10th house, this is specifically someone who would have some ambition towards being in a more a position of leadership, perhaps. And we also know this period could have the potential to be very difficult because of Mars's square to that sign. And so we know that there would also be this possibility of ruthlessness and rashness and violence. And if we kind of combine all of these different themes together, when we might be able to say that, with Mercury, because Mercury is about mutation and changing from one thing to another, that this would describe a time when he has to kind of move between two different worlds or two different identities, and that these would strain his alliances, and that he would have this leadership potential, but he might also have this potential to be seen as a kind of a troublemaker because of Mars and its square to the sign of Gemini. So what's really interesting is you can break down this period. Now, I chose kind of random events in some ways from these time frames, but I also outlined the peak periods in blue, and we can see that the peak periods seem to coincide with, again, his military career. He enters the military academy during the Cancer L2. He begins the Royal Military School during the Libra L2. And he is his big moment when he gets like kind of noticed at Toulon. That's during his Aries peak period. And the major transition point um, in any given level 1 period that is longer than 17 years is this so-called loosing of the bond. And that is really when he makes this sort of definitive break from his Corsican roots by officially allying himself with the French government. So I'm going to show that in a way that maybe is a little easier to understand. So the event of a loosing of the bond within an L1 period is often preceded by a foreshadowing period. And that is simply the first time that sign of the loosing is encountered. So 1786 is equivalent in some ways to 1794. And what's interesting about this is that in the foreshadowing period, this is when he began to become involved in Corsican politics, and then ended up kind of causing some troubles for him because his associations with these political events in Corsica, as well as his connection to Robespierre, sort of that caused his loyalties to be questioned, to France. But at the loosing of the bond, this is sort of when he, through his participation in the Vendemiaire uprising, he's sort of definitively embracing this French identity. And ultimately, this sort of describes his transition from being Napoleon the Corsican to being Napoleon the French. And another way we can see this is when we even compare on a very minor level to a very major level, what happened at the first time he experienced a loosing of the bond to Sagittarius would be another way of being able to tell what the meaning of the major level loosing of the bond to Sagittarius would be. And it just so happens that the exact date that Napoleon left Corsica for France was just 2 days after he entered the loosing of the bond to Sagittarius. So it's saying that, at age 9, his move to France, in a sense, foreshadowed the loosing of the bond in 1794 to 1795, which is when he sort of officially allies himself with France. And while there's some degree of subjectivity about like when he decisively aligned himself with France, some people could say, well, Toulon, was essentially his
Sure.
there's some, I can understand that to some degree, but I think, even after Toulon, though, he was arrested.
Sure.
And so his real breakthrough moment was really the whiff of grape shot.
Mm.
So, we can see that, in the microcosmic version of this loosing is that he went from being in Corsica to being in France, and the macrocosmic version was from being Corsican to being French. Um, so that is like the meaning of that Gemini period, is that it was the time when he mutated basically from the identity inherited to this new identity in this new place. So then we get to the peak period, which goes from March 21st, 1797 to November 11th, 1821. So that encompasses the rest of his life. And we would always know from the very day that he was born that 1797 through 1821 would be the time frame of the peak of his activities, when he would reach the highest or most impactful sort of rank that he could reach. And that more or less objectively is true. He this is when he became emperor. This is when he became a dictator, basically.
Well,
This was,
absolutely everything. I mean,
yeah.
yeah. Most of what we know about, I mean, apart from Vendémiaire and Toulon, like, yeah, everything in the movie apart from Toulon, Vendémiaire, and marrying Josephine, and I guess the Italian campaign, everything after the Italian campaign is all in this angular period. Yeah.
So, and it's interesting too, because if you think of that time, I mean, obviously it is pretty mixed according to the perspective of this technique, because it's highlighting the Venus Saturn co-presence in Cancer, as well as the Moon Pluto co-presence opposing that sign. And so, we know that in this period there would be these sort of mixed possibilities of um popularity, perhaps with Venus, but also notoriety with Saturn. And these different transits we've already looked at, with Saturn going through Cancer and going through Capricorn, these sort of represent these distinct times where he encounters limits that he can't surpass in foreign places. And this is all when it kind of happens. But it's even more hilarious when you look at the more specific breakdown of his Cancer level 1 period, because we can see that the loosing of the bond takes place July 21st, 1814 through October 8th, 1816, which coincides precisely with the Waterloo defeat, when he experiences this dramatic downfall from being an emperor to living in exile. And this kind of loosing of the bond, where it starts from a sign ruled by the moon and goes to a sign ruled by Saturn, these are characterized by the originator of this technique, Vettius Valens. He describes this as a movement from light to darkness, which is certainly evocative of going from being at the highest point possible in your cultural context to being a nobody, on an island in the middle of nowhere.
And the same is
Um,
true. The same is true, isn't it, when it goes from Leo to Aquarius? That
that's
it's also,
true.
yeah,
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 that's also true.
yeah.
Leo to Aquarius. Now, that isn't always a bad thing, but in this case, we can see that the Moon Saturn mutual reception, isn't,
Well, it's a mixed bag. Like he gets sent off to Saint Helena, but so many of his marshals, Ney, Marat, are sent to the firing squad. Like
right, right,
he really did just kind of like. The only reason I think they don't shoot him is he's too much of a symbol. They'd rather just have him out of the way and die of natural causes.
right.
Otherwise, they easily would have shot him as well.
So what's interesting is we know Capricorn is also his natal third house, which is interesting because it was mainly during the Capricorn level 2 period, this foreshadowing period, that those siblings got their political offices, wherein it highlighted his third house. But at the loosing of the bond to Capricorn, highlighting his third house, this is when his siblings lost their political offices and were similarly exiled, which makes sense if you look
Yeah.
at, the ruler of the third house is Saturn in the ninth house. The ultimate fate of his siblings would be that they would be like dispersed in foreign places and not popular. Um, so
Joseph, when he was king of Spain, he like when he leaves Spain and stops being king of Spain, he loots Spain. He takes all this money with him, and then he manages to sneak out when his brother falls. And he goes to America and he builds the second nicest house next to the White House
that's right. He lives
in
next
New
to the White House.
Jersey. Yeah, he builds this really spectacular house with this money he pilfered from Spain. And
Wow.
then youngest brother Jerome eventually winds up in the States, and his grandson Charles Bonaparte becomes Attorney General under Theodore Roosevelt and helps start what will become the FBI, the Department of Justice
Weird.
Police Force. Yeah, so there's some interesting stuff with American history as well.
That's really interesting. So in terms of Waterloo and how it was foreshadowed by the events of the previous Capricorn L2 period, it seems to be connected to the Battle of Trafalgar, because it's the idea of being defeated by the British in a smaller scale and then being defeated by the British in a much more consequential way. So there is a way in which Trafalgar ends up being the foreshadowing of the Battle of Waterloo, and shows, in a similar way, the movement of darkness, from light to darkness, Napoleon the Conqueror shifting to Napoleon the Exile. But we can even see this on a microcosm versus macrocosm level, where his first version of the loosing of the bond of Capricorn takes place at the Cairo revolt at his Saturn return. So it was both a Saturn return by transit to the degree on that day, but it also happened to be during the time frame of a loosing of the bond of Capricorn, highlighting Saturn as the ruler, when he realizes he can't go forward or can't go further in this foreign place. So in a way, the Cairo revolt, or the events of August 30th, 1798 through November 6th, 1798, end up serving as a kind of smaller scale version of the Waterloo defeat, which would happen under the same sequence but on a higher level. So essentially the microcosmic version is like going from being the conqueror to being conquered, and then the macrocosmic version is going from being emperor to being exiled. So and I also included the previous battles before these events, because we know that Gemini is one of his harder signs, because it's because it's square to his Mars in Virgo. And so it's interesting that each of these more consequential endings, at the loosing of the bond, was kind of preceded by another type of defeat. The Battle of the Nile defeat, was what happened right before the Cairo revolt, and the
Right.
Battle of the Nations defeat is what happened right before the kind of Waterloo defeat. So he has sort of
Yeah.
this like martial defeat followed by a kind of proper Saturnian reckoning. And so
And even though they all have sort of threads of winning and losing in them, not Waterloo's really decisive, but even like the Battle of Nations, it's not so much that he loses it, but it's just like the last straw. He kind of wins the battle, but he's screwed anyway. Um, and like similarly with the Battle of the Nile, he's winning a lot. Like sure, he loses at Abu Qir, but he's also beating Marmaluks and taking names in Cairo and all that. So there are some mixed bags in it all.
that's
But yeah,
yeah.
but it is still very elegant despite all the nuance. It's still like really elegant and unambiguous, I'd say, the way you've laid it out.
Right. Yeah, the kind of Taurus period is that the proud and precocious Corsican, this sort of
Hmm.
idyllic childhood in Corsica. Gemini period is basically encapsulating his movement from being this upstart Corsican military student to being a ruthless French military commander. And then the Cancer period being, reaching the greatest height to the lowest fall, from emperor to exile. And interestingly, he died
Just before he went into the succeeding period. He died in May of
yeah,
1821 when he's still in the angular period. But you and I had a really interesting conversation about how that succeeding period ends in 1840.
yeah, his body returns to
It's
France.
it's literally and really like it's like in July they send the boat to St. Helena, and right when that period is ending in August, I think they're like loading his body on a ship and sailing it back to France, where today it's or his remains are in a tomb at Les Invalides, where I did visit in 2016. That's like a sort of a military compound in Paris. where they didn't put him in the Parthenon with all those other French heroes, but he's entombed in Les Invalides. I guess, because more the French want to honor him more as a general than an emperor, I think is part of the thinking there.
Right. I just thought it was interesting that, it's almost like if he had lived a little longer, if he'd been able to survive, um I would almost have anticipated he would have made a comeback,
And
with the
he
Leo
kind of
period.
did. I mean, he
And he
did.
kind of did. Yeah, he kind of
His
did.
nephew starts the Second French Empire, the son, ironically, of Louis and Hortense. So, Josephine does wind up being a grandmother to an emperor, even though she could never give birth to an emperor herself, because her daughter marries Napoleon's brother, and they have Napoleon III. So Napoleon III has Napoleon I as an uncle, and then Josephine as literally his grandmother, his biological grandmother.
Whoops.
Yeah, keeping up with the Bonapartes.
Can you see the screen that I'm
No,
throwing up
I'm
here?
about to put it up. I have to.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But now it is.
Okay. Uh, basically, yeah, we can see like the sun in Leo would have been highlighted as the ruler and being present in that major sign in that level 1 period. If he had lived, I would think that he would have, reached potentially even greater height, even though it's not an angular period by fortune. It is angular relative to the ascendant and with the midheaven, which would, I think, still be enough to give it some juice. Interestingly, if you compare, if you look at what happened during the previous Cancer Leo period, that was April 10th, 1799 through November 1st, 1800. That coincides with when he overthrew the Directory, and it had this bloodless coup. So, I think that, had he lived, had he been able to live out the potential of that time, I'm not saying that he didn't, through his influence or legacy, potentially, but if he'd done it as a living person, I would think it would have probably been an even, grander comeback, in some ways than what he sort of attempted, before Waterloo.
Yeah.
So in any case, that's kind of how I see his Zodiacal releasing. I could have gone into greater detail about like how the aspects to each sign within, like, in the subdivision of the level 1's periods, about how those kind of describe some of the dynamics of those particular times. So for example, he had the losing of the month of Sagittarius at the Vendemiaire uprising, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, but it's squared by Mars in superior position, and it was a very bloody way that he was able to kind of advance himself. So the nature of the what he does in those periods can be kind of discovered by looking at the planetary relationships to those signs and examining things like the rulers. And so I think it works especially well in Napoleon's chart. It kind of works the way it's described out of the box.
It does. It does. And all this without a specified time of birth. Well done. Well done.
Mean,
yeah. Well,
we've been. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that, if he was born after 1130, then that would have made the first chapter of his life a 20-year period rather than the first 8-year period. And that would have made his angular period occur at a later point. So it was some overlap, but the problem with it was that he would have entered the Leo period during the time frame where he's
going off to St. Helena or whatever.
Yeah, whereas you can tell with the Zodiacal releasing from Taurus that it's the exile, the period of exile begins, his great defeat, his iconic defeat, coincides directly with the loosing of the bond from light to darkness. It's like, okay, it's unambiguous.
Brilliant. So we did it, my friend. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that we want to do like over and over and over again. Detailed deep dives into people's lives, using all the astrological tools in our arsenal to do the trick and show you how we do it on the macro scale. Well, hey, it's the thing is recorded, so you can watch it from the beginning, even if you didn't see it live. So if you missed anything, if you missed the beginning, you missed the ending. It's not like it's lost to time.
You can always watch it at double the speed,
That's right. That's right. I tend to go for 1.5 myself. That does me well.
1.5. Yeah, that
1.25
works.
sometimes if people speak quickly. But yeah, you can rewatch it, and it's there for posterity. And we're just going to add to this kind of thing. I think that the next person we're doing is Britney Spears, isn't it?
Yeah. So
I think
we're gonna dot around a lot.
yeah, we are, whoever we talk about, the next person has to be like a really incongruous example relative to whoever we just spoke about. So yeah, we'll go from like serious highbrow, cellos in the soundtrack kind of, old school biographies to if not someone contemporary, someone who's yeah, of a different cloth, from a different walk of life or what have
Yeah.
you. I can't think of anything Brittany and Napoleon have in common. So
I mean, they
but
both slay.
yeah,
They could both slay.
we managed to get through the whole show with no dad jokes, and then boom,
One slays execution. One slays prisoners. One slays on the stage. There we go.
there you go. There you go. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you,
France.
thank you, Patrick. Thank you for see, people are groaning. You
Sorry.
deserve that. You deserve that. Yeah, I'm groaning too.
So please, yes, there are a couple things we should say before we go.
Yes, let's.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
The Astrology Livestream. Just look up the
Yeah,
Astrology
the
Livestream.
Astrology Livestream. It has its own channel now, because before we had like episodes going to like both of our channels, so they were like duplicates of everything. All our old live streams are still available on our new YouTube channel, but yeah, if you want to see the new streams, you're gonna have to go to our new channel. Also, for whatever it's worth, I mean, we do have a Patreon. If you want
It
to
is worth it.
support our work, if you want to support our work, and if you want to be able to participate in our private streams, where we'll do like Q&As and have more interaction with you, and if you want to join us in our watch parties, monthly watch parties, we're also going to be doing that, where you can kind of hang out with us while we watch a movie together, and then hang out afterwards on Zoom and discuss the astrology of it and the astrological themes and the astrological insights and stories about the actors' charts and the directors' charts and the themes of the movie. And we think that would be really fun to do with you. So feel free to check us out on Patreon. Our link should be available on our YouTube page and on other places. So yeah, consider becoming a member of our Patreon. And eventually at some point we may have other channels we're opening up on other social media sites, but for now, you can find us here on YouTube and on Patreon. And we also have a site as well, the astrology podcast. The astrology live stream. Whoops. The astrologylivestream.com. So you can find some really basic information there in our links as well. So I think that's like that stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you need to say?
Smash that like button, hit subscribe. Yes, please do all that smashing and hitting and the stuff that people always implore you to do on YouTube. Please do that for us as well. Yeah, well, fantastic, Watson, and thank you for putting together the Astrology Livestream website for us.
I also forgot to mention one of the benefits of supporting us on Patreon is you get a chance to vote on what topics and subjects we might cover on our public live streams. And you will also get the opportunity to vote on like what movies or documentaries we might want to watch on our watch party nights. So if you want more information about that, it will be available on Patreon, and I will put that information up because I don't think it's up right now at this moment, but it will be there very soon. Anyways, so is this the point where we ask who we are and the answer?
Yeah, who are you, Watson?
I'm Patrick Watson. I'm an astrologer, and I do natal consultations, elections, rectifications, horary questions, tutoring, rectifications. I think I might have already said that.
You already said that, but you do them twice.
Yeah, do them twice. So you can find my services and my blogs and all my stuff at my website, patrickwatsonastrology.com.
Fantastic. And I am Nick Dagan Best. You can find me at nickdaganbestastrologer.com for all the same kind of astrological services that he offers, only they're done by me instead of him. That's the difference you get by booking me instead of him. But yes, we're both working astrologers. We both love to read your charts, and we're open for business. So please come and see us if you're so inclined. With that in mind, thank you. We haven't even we're not doing Brittany next week. We're doing her 2 weeks from now.
I need we'll need to
recharge. Yeah, I gotta go back and listen to all her records again. So all right, cool. But next week we'll figure out what we're doing. We'll announce it in between now and then. Have we decided? I don't think we've decided.
It might be one of our because we have different formats we're kind of playing with. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out what it will be.
No matter what, it's going to be awesome. So don't miss it, please. All right, fantastic. Well, with that in mind, I've got to go prepare for a client. You've got to go say hi to your family. So thank you for tuning in, everyone. Thank you to Mr. Bonaparte for contributing his life to our the topic of our live stream. And and thank you to Mr. Ridley Scott for making this movie that inspired us to do this live stream. All right. All the best, everyone. See you next week. We love you. Ciao for now.